Chapter 1084. Dooku was like a dead dog in the soul. Thanks to the Red Dragon Queen's buff, Dooku made it through. He pressed down on Tyron just like that. Normal people wouldn't like such a feeling, but Tyron seemed to enjoy treating Dooku like a human blanket. As for being 20 years late, Dooku actually wanted to say that he was only 0.002 of a time late. But considering that Tyron's days felt like years, Dooku decided to shut his mouth. Transmigration is too messy. Tyron sighed. Blame Nosdorm. When I have time, I'll definitely find him. Forget it. I'm already very happy that you're back. At least I can tell myself that the long and painful wait has finally come to an end. Phew, Dooku exhaled. Get up. We have more things to do than a mountain. Eek. Just as Tyron stood up, her body suddenly stiffened. Her blue eyebrows furrowed. What? Does it hurt? I told you not to be so crazy. Dooku took the opportunity to lecture her. No, my body is fine. You just pressed against my hair. Dooku suddenly wanted to cry. Damn, a female driver can't be hurt while racing. Half an hour later, a radiant Tyrant returned to the priestess and elegance of the high priestess. Dooku didn't know if he was a fraud or if Tyron was a fraud. All right, great uncrowned lord of the Alliance, after you've visited your precious queens, I'll be waiting for you. Remember to stay one more night when you come to sign the contract. Dooku bared his teeth. Tyron really dared to say that. All right, Dooku knew that he couldn't promise her anything. After all, he could only give her one title. If he gave her one, what about the others? If he made a mistake, the Alliance would have a civil war before the Horde could rise. But, contract? Rin and Bronzebeard invited me to join the Alliance many times. I've been dragging it out. It's not that the Night Elves don't want to join, but it's because I didn't dare to leave the fate of my people in Varian Rin's hands. He was still too young and lacked experience. And after he disappeared and returned, he became muddle-headed. When Dooku heard this, his heart skipped a beat. Indeed, without him around, history would easily return to its original path. However, Dooku had no intention of saving William at the moment. Whether or not a person could become a useful person depended on their talent. Those with good talent would undoubtedly succeed more easily than those with poor talent. In this life, William's teenage years were relatively smooth. Because of Dooku's intervention, King Lang's death was delayed for a long time. This prevented William's childhood from being too terrible. This, in turn, has its disadvantages. Without the bitter days of being homeless and living under someone else's roof, William's temperament in this life was still too jumpy and not steady enough. Apart from talent, the key to a person's success was experience. Only by gaining true experience from cruel events and sharpening one's willpower and ability would one have the opportunity to become a true expert. Therefore, even though Dooku knew who the mastermind was, Dooku still chose to remain silent. 4 years had passed, and the biggest news was Anduin Lothar's death. He had passed away peacefully last spring at the age of 65 after receiving the news of William's return. For humans in this era, Lothar was considered to have lived a long life. Moreover, he had been seriously injured during the duel with Orgrim on the Scorching Plains, which left him with a lingering illness. It was already a miracle that he could survive for so long. Moreover, he had repeatedly rejected the eternal life that Dooku had stolen from Nosdorm. My life can be said to be magnificent. I've failed before, but I've always won in the end. As a warrior, I've already obtained the ultimate glory. I have no regrets to be able to see William and you grow up and become independent. Let me die as a knight. This was what Lothar had said to Dooku back then. Dooku knew that Lothar hoped that the earthy royal bloodline, which was meaningless in his eyes, would end here. This was because a noble and righteous bloodline would not be a good thing for the human countries, or even the entire alliance. Sigh. The noble has already passed away, but a fellow like me has obtained eternal life. Dooku could not help but mock himself. Suddenly, Tyrant held Dooku's face in her hands, and a pair of silver eyes that seemed to be able to speak shot a reproachful gaze at him. Don't belittle yourself. By belittling yourself, you're belittling me. What do you think drove me to learn those things that made me want to die from embarrassment? And why do you think I had to wait for you for 10,000 years? There's only one answer. A great hero like you is worthy of me giving up everything to love you. It's worth me going crazy for you and even falling for you. Do you understand? Faced with Tyron's burning gaze, Duque could not hold it in any longer and kissed her fiercely. Compared to Lothar's death, what surprised Duque more was that Xianxia had become the queen of the new Alterac kingdom last year. Alterac's territory included the current South Sea city-state, Gorehold Castle, Terran Mill, and the old broken ridge of the former Alterac kingdom, with South Shore as its capital. Although this had all happened when Duque was not around, Duque could still understand the context of the matter. His harem seemed to be using this method to maintain their influence within the alliance. Servanas, Jaina, Xianxia, and now Tyrant as well as Kalia, who had always been loyal to Duque, meant that Duque had 5 votes in the kingdom. Moreover, Bolvar for Dragon was the regent of Stormwind, so it was not difficult to convince him. This meant that Duque still had the absolute say in the alliance. Originally, the alliance had a great advantage, but the problem was that in these 4 years, the Horde had risen rapidly. The biggest difference was that in this life, the Horde had accepted goblins into the Horde in advance. He did not know if it was because of the history of the Battle of the Scorching Plains, or because he had personally witnessed the Battle of Mount Hyjal, but the performance of the alliance had deeply stimulated Thrall. As a result, after the goblins on both sides who wanted to earn money through underhanded means were jointly blocked by Jaina and Xianxia, Thrall directly threw out an olive branch to the angry goblins. In addition, Anastrian had brought the Forsaken to Winterspring. In terms of results, the Horde had basically surrounded half of the Night Elves' territory. Duque narrowed his eyes, and first drew a circle on the map of the Kalimdor continent, at the place that would become Rustwater Port in the future. We must not let the Horde surround us. What gave Duque the most headache was that in the report that Aurelia had sent to Tyrant, there was a piece of information. A large number of orcs, formerly of the Blackrock clan, had begun to occupy the Blackrock mountain area between the Burning Plains and the Scorching Canyon. They showed signs of colluding with the Black Dragons. Chapter 1085. After returning, Duque had a mountain of things to do. He should have immediately returned to Stormwind, but he owed Tyron too much. He could only give in under Tyron's aggrieved gaze and agree to stay for a few more days. After the Battle of Mount Hyjal, Malfurion had once again entered the Emerald Dream, and Fandral Staghelm had just successfully planted the new world tree, Teldrassil. Although the Dragon Kings refused to bless the Night Elves with eternal life, the Night Elves who believed that the world tree was everything were now worshipping Fandral. Tyrande did not bother with the popular Fandral, and instead gave him some of her worldly power. Duque asked around and felt that there were no problems. The leader of the Sentinels was now Chandri's Feathermoon, Tyrande's adopted daughter. In other words, Tyrande, who had military and divine power, was in no danger at all in terms of political power. But then again, daughter? I almost thought that Chandri's was our daughter. Duque seemed to say it casually, but he actually felt a little regretful. It had been 20 years since he transmigrated. Although his physical body was eternal, Duque felt that it was weird that no one had died. If it was just a woman, he might be able to push the blame. It's not that easy. Tyrande, who had just finished a great battle, smiled with satisfaction. Do you think I didn't want to have a child with you? With a child, I wouldn't have been so lonely in the past 10,000 years. But Goddess Elune told me not to think about it before I become a demigod. Duque cried out. What? Didn't the goddess repair your soul and expel the power of darkness for you after the War of the Ancients? That's right. After that, the goddess sighed. It was the first time she saw such a special soul. Tyrande sighed regretfully. Special? How so? The souls of other creatures are fixed. Unless they have a miraculous encounter, their soul capacity will only decrease most of the time. But your soul seems to be able to increase or decrease at will. As long as the core of your soul is not damaged, you can even revive like a demigod. A mortal who has the chance to come back from the dead like a demigod. Duque's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly smiled bitterly. He didn't expect it to be like this. Coincidentally, his greatest secret came from his most special soul. Having such a soul is a blessing from the heavens for magic cultivation. The fact that you've reached the Breaking Dawn realm at such a young age proves this point. Tyrant touched her flat abdomen through her mooncloth priestess dress. A woman's stomach can give birth to life, but it still requires the soul seeds of both parents to be planted in it. Only then can a complete new life be born. Du Mao was dumbfounded. Whether it's me or the other lovers you've met before, the strength of our souls is pretty good. Unfortunately, it's not strong enough to bear your soul seed. That's why I'm willing to be your lover, not your wife. Tyrant hugged Duque tenderly. Is that so? Duque was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. There was a faint bitter smile on Tyrant's pure face. Of course it's true. Didn't you see that our goddess had no choice but to give herself to Lord Malorn? Only the strongest demigod can barely become the partner of a true god. Back then, our goddess had forcefully suppressed her own power to give birth to the demigod Cenarius. On the other hand, if you can become a demigod, you might be able to control and suppress the power of your own soul and give us a child. Duque's heart was in turmoil. Damn, there's actually such a thing. It was very mysterious and very nonsensical, but Duque's intuition told him that it was all true. Duque secretly asked the system elf, and received a similar feeling. My apologies. Ever since you became a radiant moon wizard, your soul power has far surpassed that of a woman in the hero domain. I had no choice but to forbid you from leaking your soul power. Otherwise, every time you use your divine sword, you'll instantly give your opponent 100 radiant moon, Breaking Dawn level, spirit blast. If you want to take someone's life, I can help you open the door to your soul. Duque was also helpless when this matter was brought up. But deep down, Duque didn't want to suppress his power to give birth like Elun. Which father didn't want their offspring to surpass their parents? The demigod Cenarius sounded very cool, didn't it? Grandpa Roar could kill him with one chop of his axe. In the ancient war, although the wild boar gods and bear gods weren't as weak as trash, they weren't strong enough. They were almost wiped out by the Burning Legion at their peak. At this thought, Duque let out a turbid breath. It seemed that he had to break through the Breaking Dawn level and become a demigod as soon as possible. At the demigod level, he would at least have a true immortal body. For example, White Stag Malorn. After he died in the ancient war, Elun didn't even cry, because Malorn didn't really die. Another example was Mediv, who was said to have died in Karazhan. When the Calamity army arrived, his mother made a move and immediately believed in Brother Spring and revived on the spot. Pursuing immortality? It seems that I'm still a normal person. While Duque was mocking himself, he suddenly felt waves of spatial fluctuations. Tyrant's expression darkened. Your lovers really do send people to keep an eye on me 24/7. I wanted to monopolize you for a few more days. Duque rubbed his forehead and thought, they're already giving you a lot of face. Otherwise, they would have attacked you immediately. How could they wait for more than a day? You've already made such a big commotion with Starfall, how can you hide it from them? Dark Portal, Year 20, December 25th. Many Alliance queens and important figures suddenly visited Teldrassil. Seeing Chandri's stuttering as she sent a message saying that the Alliance queens had suddenly arrived, Tyrant elegantly let go of Duque's hand, tidied up her clothes, and smiled. Let them in. The door opened, and Sylvanas, who couldn't hold herself back, was the first to rush in. She pressed Duque down and kissed him passionately. Elugia and the rest surrounded Duque gently, waiting for Sylvanas to finish venting his feelings before going up to him. Only Aurelia walked over and extended her right hand to Tyrant. Should I say welcome? Tyrant smiled like a flower. Time travel is a terrible thing, but this is good. At least in the calendar, I'm Duque's first woman. Aurelia rolled her eyes. Chapter 1086. Just then, Jaina walked over and teased, I wonder which high priest said that he was only poisoned and then saved by a guy called Dukong? Tyrant leaned over and whispered into Jaina's ear, Are you going to admit to a stranger that you don't know well that you were taken captive on the battlefield, and that you lost both your body and mind, only to find out that he was the strongest traitor in the Burning Legion, and that you turned the tides and became a great hero? You didn't lose anything, and you even received the approval and blessings of your goddess? Tyron's matter had been thoroughly investigated by Vanessa after she returned. All the women in Duque's harem knew about it. Even though they knew, they still felt that it was very mysterious. The leaders of the allied nations that had no interaction with each other before the Battle of Mount Hyjal had already been taken care of by their own men in the future. Just thinking about it made their heads burn. Aurelia wasn't angry at all. Instead, she smiled and asked, "Why didn't you confirm it before the Battle of Mount Hyjal?" Tyron shook her head. "The great hero I know, Du Kong, is a superhero who has the blessing of the moon goddess Elun and the blessing of the life giver. During the Battle of Seamount and Mountain, Duque didn't have these two blessings. So that's how it is. All right, sisters." Sylvanas finally finished eating and pulled up Duque, whose upper body was covered in lipstick marks. "Since that bastard Duque is finally willing to return from the River of Time, let's celebrate." Aurelia, Sasha, Alicia, Jaina, and Tyrant all raised their hands in excitement. "Oh, hooray! Duque, don't think that just one more vote is enough. Accept your fate." Seeing the excited harem, Duque was embarrassed. "All right. Luckily, I have Alexstras's blessing." If the Red Dragon Queen knew that Duque used her blessing like this, would Duque be beaten to death? This could also be considered as some kind of happy trouble. On that day, it was rumored that someone had seen a few sexy Christmas girls at the gushing spring lake going in and out of the place where Duque was staying. There was even a general of a certain sentinel troop who claimed that he saw his beloved adoptive mother wrapping a red ribbon around him, treating him as some kind of Christmas present, and putting him into a big Christmas gift box. Of course, a certain someone seemed to have been forced by a certain high priest to swear that he had never said such a thing. All the trifles were tidbits of news, not worth mentioning. There was only one piece of news that swept across the entire Alliance and Horde in the shortest time possible. The great hero of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, who had saved the world many times, had finally returned from the River of Time. On the same day, the Night Elves reached an agreement with the Alliance and announced that they would join the Alliance. After receiving the news, Thrall, who was patrolling Orgrimmar's Valley of Power, suddenly smiled bitterly. Should I say, as expected of Duke Marcus? Beside him, Grom, whose hair had already turned white, suddenly said, "I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's him. Unfortunately, he's not from the tribe." Indeed. Thrall didn't even need to open the map to know how disadvantageous it would be for the Horde if the Night Elves joined the Alliance. Grey Valley itself was the traditional territory of the Night Elves. Even if his subordinates yelled, "If the elves don't want to give us more wood, we'll get it ourselves," Thrall had never thought of waging war with the elves. The elves were not a weak race. Even if they lost 100,000 troops in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, the elves were still very powerful, and it was impossible to win without the strength of the entire Horde. Moreover, the elves' nest had already been moved to the giant island of Teldrassil. Even if the Horde could occupy Grey Valley, they would not be able to completely dominate the entire continent of Kalimdor. This was because the Black Coast to the northwest of Kalimdor had an extremely long and complicated coastline, and the Elven fleet could land on any part of the coast. The Horde's navy was completely absent. Thrall let out a long sigh. He knew that if Duque sacrificed himself, it would be for the world of Azeroth, but the reproduction and survival of a race was such a cruel thing. If a race or an organization wanted to survive and develop, they would need more living space and more resources. Without Duque, the Alliance would be like a plate of loose sand. William, that little brat, would not be able to support such a large alliance, let alone deal with the incomparably complicated internal situation of the Alliance. As long as the Night Elves did not join the Alliance, Thrall was confident that he could make use of the orc's strong reproductive ability and use at most 2 generations of 30 years to make the Horde the overlord of Kalimdor. It was a pity that the person he did not want to see the most had returned. At first, he did not feel it, but now it seemed that Duque's plan was extremely incisive. When he first opened up Du Roder, he did not think too much about it. Later, he found out that the Alliance had opened up Theramore City in the southern part of Duroder. Now that the Night Elves had joined the Alliance, it was tantamount to a pincer attack on Orgrimmar from the north and south. This was quite detrimental to the development of the Horde. Once, the goblins had mentioned to him that they wanted Azhara's land. If Duque was not here, it might have been possible. But now that Duque was here, the Horde would not have a chance. It had only been 5 years since the orcs came to Kalandor. The group of refugee children had just grown up, which allowed the Horde's military strength to recover to a little more than 100,000. With the technical support of the goblins, the Horde's military strength had greatly increased. Unfortunately, they were still no match for the Alliance. It was because he had fought alongside the Alliance that Thrall clearly understood what kind of monster the Alliance was now. They could easily mobilize more than 1 million regular soldiers, and all the youths had to undergo strict military training. In fact, the Alliance had more than 3 million reserve soldiers. Moreover, the battle at Mount Hyjal had proven that the Alliance had the terrifying ability to quickly transport more than 100,000 troops across the sea. With the Burning Legion and the Scourge Army as a common enemy, the Alliance was, of course, happy to cooperate with the Horde. However, after losing the common goal, the conflict between the two sides would definitely be triggered again due to territorial disputes and other issues. After all, no one had forgotten the hatred of the past. The previous generation of Alliance warriors had all become generals, and they had not forgotten the wanton massacre of the old Horde on the Eastern Kingdom. Similarly, the Horde had not forgotten the days when they were enslaved by the Alliance. This hatred would not be so easily resolved. It was very likely that there would be a war between the Alliance and the Horde in the future. Thinking of this, Thrall felt a little suffocated. He turned to inform Varrock, "Tell Anastrian that I agree to meet him in secret. He can choose the location, but it cannot be too far from the Horde's territory." Chapter 1087. Grom was a little surprised. "You want to use those bones?" Thrall didn't care. Ever since the battle at the Dark Portal, the Horde has been using the Death Knight tradition, hasn't it? Orgrim did it, and so did the former chief, Nizul. Grom shook his head. "I mean, aren't you afraid of angering the Alliance?" Thrall smiled. "That's why it's a secret meeting. As long as the Alliance doesn't declare war on the Horde, the Forgotten Ones won't join the Horde." Grom sighed. "You've really matured." Thrall still had a difficult childhood in this life. Whether it was his career as a gladiator, Orgrim's teachings, or the experience of leading his people west to the Endless Sea, Thrall had trained him well. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if Varian hadn't gone missing in this life, he would have been completely defeated by Thrall. After becoming the leader of the Horde for 5 years, Thrall had become more mature and far-sighted. The rarest thing was that Thrall, who was making the Horde rise again, was only 20 years old. The people of the Horde didn't doubt that Thrall could lead the Horde for at least another 30 years. Thrall looked to the east. The Horde has fallen far behind the Alliance. I hope that the disaster at the Burning Steps can hold the Alliance back. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that other than a certain cheating transmigrator, the Horde knew the disaster that the Alliance had caused. That was because the ones who led the trouble at the Blackrock Mountain were the 2 sons of the first chief, Red Blackhand and Maim Blackhand. Thrall had originally lamented that the Alliance had completely dominated the Eastern Kingdom and was far stronger than the Horde. Now that he received this news, Thrall only wanted to laugh. The location of the Burning Steps was too important. It was located in the core area of the southern continent, but the geographical conditions were extremely harsh. There was lava and volcanic ash everywhere, and it wasn't a place for humans to live. Other than the Blackrock Orcs and Black Iron Dwarves who were naturally resistant to fire, no other race could live well there. Even Thrall would have a headache if he were to occupy a place like the Blackrock Mountain. At this time, Thrall still had the mentality of watching a show. If he knew who the real master of the Blackrock Spire was and what was under the Blackrock Mountain, his attitude might be a little different. The Dark Portal, December 28, 2020. Even in the warmer Stormwind, it was still a world of ice and snow. Winter was the time when all things withered. Winter was also the time when people who had worked hard for a year could enjoy the fireplace in their warm homes and enjoy the harvest of the year. Thanks to Duque's valuable thoughts on internal affairs, the current Stormwind was far better than the Stormwind in history, where people struggled in hardship. From west to east, there was a railway that ran through the entire kingdom. The wheat in the western wilderness could be harvested today, and the day after, it could be transported across the entire elven forest along the railroad, bypassing the Riedridge Mountains and passing through the Swamp of Sorrows to the watchtower in the Cursed Land. From north to south, there was a subway from Ironforge to Stormwind City. From Stormwind City to Goldflash Town, all the way south through the Twilight Forest, a new railway was being built. Currently, the southernmost end of the railway had reached Crow Ridge. In another 2 years, this north-south railway would reach Stranglethorn Vale. Even though the railway was only half open, a steady stream of weapons and supplies was still being sent through the railway to the Expeditionary Army in Stormwind to develop Stranglethorn Vale. Now, the area around the Hordesgrom High Camp, including the Burral and Zakunda ruins, had officially become Stormwind's territory. The entire kingdom was talking about the troll ornaments and gold tools that had been plundered from the Troll Empire's ruins. With the addition of the Riedridge Mountains, the Swamp of Sorrows, and the Upwind Path under Duque's control, Stormwind's territory was more than 3 times larger than it was in history. The prosperous situation made every citizen smile from ear to ear. At the same time, it also bred corruption. With the economy doing well, the lords of Stormwind could practically lie down at home and still earn money every day. Gradually, the new generation of nobles forgot the humiliation of losing their territories and the grief of losing their loved ones, and began to indulge in pleasure. On the 28th, the important ministers of Stormwind gathered at the new Stormwind stronghold. This was because they were going to discuss the next year's important matters. Every year, major events of Stormwind would be discussed in winter and carried out in the spring of the next year. Luxurious carriages were parked in front of the even more majestic Stormwind stronghold's gate. Many nobles, even if they were just there to listen, were dressed to the nines. Since 2 years ago, they had formed a habit of waiting at the gate of the stronghold for her to appear. She did not disappoint them, and she came. 2 pure black horses without a single strand of hair on them pulled a black carriage with golden edges and slowly drove into the square in front of the fortress. A peerless beauty stepped out of the carriage with the help of a marquis. She had long black hair that fell to her shoulders, soft and smooth. She seemed to have been carved by a craftsman in imitation of a goddess, and she had the most charming smile on her face. She wore a purple shirt with silver edges and a diamond-shaped hollowness in the middle of her chest, showing off her seemingly bottomless cleavage. She wore a bright red floor-length dress. Just her appearance alone caused a wave of low exclamations of admiration. 4 dozens of nobles to wait. Those who did not know might have thought that there was a queen in Stormwind, and they were waiting for the queen to arrive with a posture of worship. Unfortunately, she was not a queen. She was just a countess, Countess Katrana and Risto, the illegitimate daughter of an old Stormwind noble. In fact, that noble had already been annihilated at sea during the retreat of Stormwind City in the first year of the Dark Portal. But she had enough documents to prove her identity, and with the most elegant speech and wisdom, she conquered the entire Stormwind noble circle in a short span of 3 years. If it wasn't for Duke's precedent, her rise to fame would have been a legend. Not only did she have amazing social skills, but she was also extremely outstanding in internal affairs. After Lucia ran off to become Alterax's queen, Bolvar had no choice but to accept the fact that this woman had snatched the power of internal affairs. Bolvar was an excellent regent. He was impeccable in terms of strength, virtue, and loyalty. Unfortunately, there was only one person in the world like Duque who could even cross realms. His talent was all in military affairs. Originally, the next year's Internal Affairs Conference would still be the same as the past 2 years, with Katrana's words being in charge. This was because no one could refute her in the field of internal affairs. Today, the atmosphere seemed a little different. The nobles realized that beside the silly William, there was not only Bolvar's regent chair, but also a very mage-style chair. Suddenly, the ceremonial officer announced, "The Grand Duke of Stormwind, His Excellency Duke Marcus, has arrived." Chapter 1088. Every Stormwind nobleman gasped in shock. This was the Stormwind Kingdom, the strongest human kingdom in the entire Eastern Kingdom. 20 years ago, the Stormwind Kingdom had been destroyed in the first battle of the Dark Portal. However, the fallen Stormwind Kingdom was miraculously recovered, and it took more than 10 years to rise again, becoming one of the most outstanding human kingdoms. Even the oldest human kingdom, Lordaeron, could not compare to Stormwind. Due to the plague of the Scourge and the loss of a large number of people in the war, the once powerful Lordaeron was now just a second-rate kingdom. On the other hand, Stormwind was able to thwart the infiltration and conspiracy of the Cursed Church during the Third Battle of the Dark Portal due to Duque's prior arrangements. They managed to avoid the plague that broke out in the northern continent. Moreover, when Lordaeron fell, Stormwind took in a large number of refugees and invested them in the development of Stranglethorn Vale and the Swamp of Sorrows. Even after the war ended, those who stayed were given land. Queen Kalia of Lordaeron did not force her people to return. Overall, Stormwind's national strength did not decline. The previous king, Lang, was undoubtedly an excellent king, but that was all. Compared to his two incomparably dazzling and inescapable subjects, Ryan was just a mediocre person. Anduin Lothar, the leader of the Stormwind Royal Guards, the leader of the Iron Horse Brotherhood, the first commander of the Alliance, the strongest human warrior, and the last confirmed direct descendant of Thoradin the Great. His life could be said to be legendary. He had participated in the killing of the demon king Sardras who had possessed Mediva's body, killed the first chief of the Horde, fought head-on against Grom Hellscream, who had killed many famous Alliance knights in the Silverpine Forest, and led the charge in the Battle of the Scorching Plains when his side was at a disadvantage. His heroic story could be said for 3 days and 3 nights. Lothar was a model of chivalry. He was worshipped by countless knights and was destined to be sung for thousands of years. However, there was another person who was more famous than Lothar. That was Duke Marcus, the uncrowned king. On the military front, Duque had personally pierced through the chest of Mediv, who was possessed by Sardras. He commanded the weak army of Stormwind to set fire to the 200,000 Horde soldiers. He miraculously saved 50,000 Stormwind elites on the floating ice island, and was appointed as the Alliance's vice-commander before the age of 20. After that, he led the army to fight for thousands of miles, from the Battle of South Shore where the sea was dyed red, to the Eagle Nest Mountain, to the northernmost Kuil Salis on the mainland, to the siege of the Horde in Rotterdam, and finally to the decisive battle on the Scorching Plains that made the name of the Lightning War resound in both heaven and hell. When the Horde's third-generation chief, Nizul, led the army to counterattack, it was his watchtower defense line that defeated the Horde's ferocious counterattack. During the Third Battle of the Dark Portal, he led the Alliance and defeated the main force of the Calamity Army in one fell swoop. In the end, the Calamity Army that had swept the Rotterdam Kingdom, the Dalajan Kingdom, the Rapids Castle Kingdom, and the Kuil Salis Kingdom was expelled from the Rotterdam Kingdom. What followed was the Battle of Mount Hyjal that almost destroyed the entire world of Azeroth. It was no exaggeration to say that in the field of military affairs, Duke Marcus was the god of war. Just based on this battle record alone, it was enough for Duque to be praised for thousands of years. But it was more than that. In the field of civil affairs, Duque was the greatest inventor and reformer. The new seeding technology, the mold-based construction of houses, the development of the marine economy in combination with the Murloc Nagas, the medical security system, the 6-year compulsory education, the economic construction of the Belt and Road Railway, and the Continental Integrated Economic Model that linked all railway and sea transportation. Many of his views and new ideas were fiercely opposed by countless people at the beginning. He used his unique vision and charisma to promote all of this in an almost tyrannical way. Time proved that everything he did and every policy he promulgated was correct. That was how the Stormwind, which had been completely destroyed by the war, was pulled into the Stormwind, which was extremely rich in resources today. His territory was already larger than the Stormwind, and even larger than many small countries. Rumors of his flirtatious exploits with several queens were spreading everywhere. No, it was no longer rumors. At least the 3 queens of Kratiras, Lordaeron, and Alterac publicly announced that the person they loved was Duque. As long as Duque was willing, he would not hesitate to change the surname of the royal family to Marcus. However, Duque chose to be loyal, and like the other lords in the kingdom, he fulfilled his obligations as a vassal to the king of Stormwind. There was such a standard in the noble circle that was recognized all over the world. As long as a vassal paid taxes to the king on time and sent troops according to the strength of the territory during the war, he was a perfect vassal. Obviously, Duque's Marcus family did this impeccably. Therefore, for the nobles, Duque was also the embodiment of loyalty. Originally, it was said that Duque almost died because he was cursed in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, and after he recovered, he participated in the secret mission of the Dragon of Time, Nozdormu, and was likely to die in the River of Time. Suddenly, there was news that he had returned. After all, Duque was a legend among legends, a living legend. The nobles had mixed feelings. They coveted the benefits brought by Duque, but they also did not want Duque to return, because the return of such a powerful Grand Duke was bound to reshuffle the power of the entire kingdom. Compared to Duque, even Bolvar for Dragon, the regent, had to step aside. As the ceremonial officer finished the roll call, an archmage dressed in a dazzling epic mage equipment appeared at the door of the conference hall. Every single piece of equipment on his body emitted a strong magical wave visible to the naked eye. Even though he had repeatedly suppressed the magical power of the equipment, the flowing light and vibrant colors still overshadowed the jewelry worn by the nobles. Half a step behind Duque were two vassals of Duque, Earl Edwin Van Cleve and Earl Reginald Windsor. Behind them were two beautiful women dressed in maid clothes, and one of them was an elf. Those who knew the inside story, of course, knew that one was Van Cleve's daughter, Vanessa, and the other was the former follower of Prince Kuel Salis, Solarian. Not to mention the two important ministers signing autographs, even the maids were heroic domain masters or radiant moon mages. Only Duque could be so extravagant. Every noble, whether marquis or dukes, bowed their heads in respect. Duque strode forward, but stopped in front of a beautiful, black-haired female noble. "Hello, beautiful lady, may I, Duke Marcus, have the honor to know your name?" "Hello, Your Excellency Duke Marcus, I am Countess Katrana Anristo." Katrana performed a very standard and elegant ladylike bow. "Very good. I'll remember you." A mysterious smile appeared on Duque's face. Chapter 1089. Remember you. The entire meeting hall was instantly filled with a low and rude commotion. No one cared about this little bit of impoliteness. To many nobles, this was definitely something that the Countess of Anristo could be proud of. Just like the epic achievements of the legendary hero, Duke Marcus, in the aristocratic circle and even the commoners' daily conversations, if a lady was fancied by Duke, it could be regarded as a glory that could be bragged about for a lifetime. Once upon a time, because countless noble ladies had tried to climb into Duque's bed when he was just an ordinary noble, many nobles envied and hated Duque and slandered Duque's sexual orientation. Later, as Duque's female friends were exposed one by one, this group of nobles who were gossipy to death immediately changed the topic and boasted that only women who could catch Duque's eye were the true top beauties in the world. Just look, Jaina, Ilucia, Kalia, the three Windrunner sisters, all those who were related to Duque were all famous super beauties. Suddenly, Duque expressed interest in this new noble lady who had recently appeared in the circle of nobles in Stormwind. The noble's soul of gossip was burning. The female nobles were envious. The male nobles were pounding their chests and stamping their feet because they felt that they had no advantage in front of the great hero and Grand Duke Duque. Apart from boasting that they had a slight advantage in terms of appearance, they all lost by a wide margin. Alright, this was just a small interlude. Although Bolvar, who had long been standing beside William, frowned at Duque's somewhat frivolous behavior, it did not matter. What happened next was the key. This was because the person Duque wanted to see was the King of Stormwind. This scene made many of the royal faction rather nervous because Duque's power was too great. King Lang had written more than one will before the war, appointing Anduin and Duque as regents for the young princes. The power of these two regents was beyond the imagination of outsiders. Anduin is my arm, and Duque is my brain. I trust them more than I trust myself. So, if they believe that my son does not have the right to be king, then they can choose another descendant of mine. If my bloodline is severed, then they have the right to hand over Stormwind to a more suitable person. They had the power to veto the Storm King. The power of these two regents was astonishing. What was even rarer was the fact that he had obtained the unanimous approval of King and Queen Lang, as well as the approval of the high-ranking nobles of Stormwind. At the end of the day, even Bolvar's position as the regent was actually given to him by Anduin. Obviously, even though they were both old Storm nobles, Bolvar's prestige was far inferior to Anduin's. The most obvious example was that Varian's son was named Anduin Rin. And after this little prince was baptized in the Church of Holy Light, his Christian name was impressively Duma, the first two words of Duke Marcus. Bolvar was also rather nervous now because William, after his disappearance, he had become muddle-headed, just like a puppet. It was obvious that William was not suitable to be a king in such a state. If Duque announced that he was no longer a king, then Bolvar really could not find a reason to object. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Duque continued to move forward and arrived in front of the statue-like William, who was sitting foolishly on the throne. Seeing the beads of sweat on Bolvar's forehead, Duque smiled calmly. Phew! This smile made Bolvar, who represented the knights, secretly heave a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, Duque did not kneel down on one knee or even bow. Instead, he bowed to Queen Tiffany, who was sitting on the throne beside William. After bowing, Duque raised his head and said in a clear voice, "My apologies. I will not bow to a soulless body." Queen Tiffany's face instantly turned pale. William is just sick. The Queen, who was supposed to have died in the riot of the Mason Brotherhood, was still fine because Van Cleef had followed Duque and Stormwind was not as chaotic as in history. Duque shook his head and said loudly so that all the nobles could hear, "No. This is not a sickness. His Majesty William Rin's soul is not in his body." A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The commotion among the nobles could not be suppressed. After his disappearance and recovery, William had been like a fool. Almost all the nobles thought that William had been hit in the head and was suffering from a concussion. Who knew that Duque would publicly say that William's soul was no longer in his body? If someone else had said this, there would definitely have been a lot of doubts. However, Duque was the strongest person in the realm of mystery. What's going on? Bolvar was very agitated. He stepped forward and almost wanted to grab Duque's shirt to ask. Everyone knew that William's disappearance had nothing to do with Duque. At that time, everyone knew that Duque had gone to participate in Nozdormu's secret mission. However, Duque suddenly said that William's soul was no longer in his body. This was obviously a huge conspiracy. Duque shook his head. "I don't know. But I can confirm that this is a type of evil magic. The Burning Legion or the Calamity Legion." Bolvar lost his voice. "If I have to say what it is, I'm afraid it's more like the methods of the ancient gods." "Then, don't worry, Bolvar. I have never thought of abolishing His Majesty William Rin." Suddenly, Duque's aura became very mysterious, and a torturous aura surged out. "When I was floating in the river of time, I saw a fragment of William's glorious future." *CK. Was it that ridiculous? He even saw the future? All right, in theory, Duque had inherited it from Medivh. Medivh had already warned the various countries before the arrival of the Calamity Legion, which once again proved that Medivh was a torturous, no, a prophet. Now that Duque actually said that William would be very powerful, it was really hard for everyone to refute him. Duque turned his head and faced a large group of nobles. He raised his hands high and said, "I have always believed that humans are not born noble. If bloodline determines everything, then the great Anduin Lothar should be the ruler of the 7 human countries, and not choose to end his own bloodline." Duque's sudden statement caught the nobles off guard. Everyone was wondering what Duque was trying to do. Duque continued, "Whether a person is noble or not depends on his actions. Therefore, I think that His Majesty William, who has always been committed to building a better country and doing his best for the alliance, is a competent king. Therefore, as the subjects of His Majesty, what we have to do is to build a greater country in Stormwind when His Majesty is not around. Chapter 1090. If Duque deposed the king from the start, it would undoubtedly maximize the effect of establishing dominance, but it would also bring about another consequence, the division of power in Stormwind. Even if Duque put Anduin Rin on the throne, there would still be suspicions of narrowing the emperor to order his vassals. If he maintained the status quo, it would not disturb the core knights of Stormwind, nor would it alarm someone. With Duque being so easy to talk to, those guys who were ready to make trouble had no choice but to stop. After all, with Duque's identity and status, with such a huge foundation and the support of external forces, even if Duque told the Rin family to get lost and he himself became the king of Stormwind, it would not be surprising. Duque was advancing by retreating. Since he had given up on the most crucial issue of royal power, he would definitely reap the benefits in other areas. This was something that the nobles with a little political knowledge would understand. But no one would have thought that Duque's next bombshell would be so shocking. Like the most passionate speaker, Duque's hands were raised high like a conductor of an orchestra, stirring the heartstrings of the nobles. Everyone, are you satisfied? Satisfied? Satisfied with what? Living in a castle that looks magnificent on the outside, but is actually built on quicksand, enjoying prosperity that can be destroyed at any time, and the taxes of your subjects, even if you will die in a few years. Even so, are you satisfied? What? Destroy? Again? Most of the nobles' faces were covered with makeup, but now, under the heavy makeup, their faces were as pale as they looked. Of course not. Death and the loss of inheritance were almost the things that the nobles feared the most. After experiencing 3 battles at the Dark Portal, is there anyone who still dreams of eternal peace? If there is, then let me give you a word of advice. Don't be naive. The demons of the Burning Legion have already set their eyes on this beautiful planet. There may be peace, but every subsequent peace will be extremely short. If you do not wish to be destroyed, then bring out your drive, bring out your dignity as a noble, and prepare for war. What? Where is the enemy? As the leader of the knights, Bolvar stood up without hesitation. Duque waved his hand to stop Bolvar. There's no rush. This time, I'm here to tell everyone that the era of nobles being able to watch the soldiers fight on the front line as if it had nothing to do with them as long as they send soldiers and pay them is over, while they safely have a party in the rear is over. When Duque said this, all the nobles in the meeting hall felt their hearts skip a beat. Obviously, Duque was going to use his ultimate move. I hereby formally request Stormwind to reform the tax system. In the future, all tax officials will be dispatched by the kingdom. Taxes are divided into national tax and local tax in proportion. The national tax would be paid directly to the state and controlled by the state. The land tax was collected by the lord and used for the lord's daily expenses as well as the construction of the territory. At the same time, all entrance fees and road tolls will be abolished. In terms of military affairs, greatly reduce the number of private soldiers that nobles can legally possess. Grand dukes can only have 1,000 soldiers at most, and so on. The disbanded soldiers and those who pass the physical examination will all be incorporated into the country's regular army. The rest will be reorganized into local garrisons and supported by the country's finance. In terms of armaments, all mines will be uniformly mined by the country. Every year, a guide price will be set based on the market price and economic returns will be given to the lords. At the same time, the lords have the obligation to allocate empty land near the main roads for the country to build various military facilities according to local conditions. In one breath, Duque threw out a combination of punches, directly shocking the nobles to the point of suffering internal injuries. All the nobles felt like they were about to faint. This was digging out the roots of the nobles. In name, taxes did not increase, but which nobles did not have their own private coffers? Every year, the taxes would be 10,000 gold coins. At most, they would report 3,000 gold coins, and then pay 3,000 as taxes to the king. Now that even the tax officials had been changed to the countries, that private coffer would be the first to be destroyed. In terms of military affairs, Abolishing the private soldier system was equivalent to abolishing military power. In the future, any family soldiers would only be at the level of a guard of honor and would not even be qualified to rebel. In terms of armaments, the nobles who occupied the mountains as kings were forced into a dead end. In the past, those who had mines in their territories were like hens that laid golden eggs, practically earning money while lying down. There were even lords who secretly refined the mines themselves, forged them into weapons, and secretly sold them to the tribes. Now, no one could play any tricks. With such a reform, nominally, the territories still belonged to the lords, but there would be no profits or autonomy. This was simply the biggest subversion of the aristocratic system. A marquis named Liunali exclaimed on the spot, "No! Even you, Grand Duke Marcus, do not have the right to announce the abolition of the aristocratic fiefdoms. This is the aristocratic norm set by Thoradin the Great. This is the cornerstone of the entire aristocratic world." Duque did not answer directly, but instead smiled strangely. "Sir Marquis, have you ever seen a big explosion that almost destroyed the world?" No, I have seen it. I just went to the ancient war 10,000 years ago and saw how the ancient Kalimdor continent exploded, exploding into today's Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdom continent. Do you want me to show you some magic images?" Although he said no, in fact, Duque had already started to show them with a wave of his hand. "Well, I'm sorry to inform you that there will be similar catastrophes in the near future. Sir Marquis, even if Stormwind City is likely to be engulfed by lava, do you still want to tell me that the rules set by Thoradin the Great, which destroyed the Empire 2,000 years ago, cannot be changed? Even if the Lava Lord Ragnaros, who is sleeping in the burning steppes, is about to awaken and turn the entire southern continent into a sea of fire purgatory, do you still dare to say that it has nothing to do with us?" The aristocrats' faces turned green, but they did not know how to refute. Duque's voice suddenly rose by an octave. "Everyone! The times have changed. Relying on the contributions of our ancestors to enjoy the glory and splendor for 1,000 years is bound to be a dream. In the past 20 years His Majesty Lang Rin, and His Excellency Anjuin Lothar have done so much for this country, carried out so many reforms, and built Stormwind City so strong together with everyone, not to give you the capital to be corrupt." "Corrupt, is it?" Bolvar suddenly laughed bitterly. The kingdom had become extravagant, and it was not that he did not notice this change. But as a great aristocrat, he could not stop the aristocrats from indulging in gold every day, living the same luxurious life as before. It was only at this moment that he realized how great Duque's reforms were. The world is facing destruction. We do not need vermin. Aristocrats who claim to be the elites of the kingdom. You have no choice. Either you keep up with the changes of the times, or you fall behind. At this point, Duque's face revealed a murderous look. "Of course. You can object. As long as you throw away the noble insignia on your chest and walk out of this door, your objection will take effect immediately." Chapter 1091. The nobles were shocked. They couldn't believe their ears. Duque, who had been missing for a long time, came back with drastic reforms and targeted at the roots of the nobles. Were the nobles still nobles without financial and military power? What right did the nobles have to do whatever they wanted in their own territories? Wasn't it just financial and military power? Almost all the respect and power were obtained from these two things. Now, without even informing them, he directly said that he would take back their power. This was killing them. They almost wanted to rebel on the spot. Unfortunately, no one dared. Compared to a peerless expert who killed the Demon King Sardras and the Demon Commander Archimond, they were practically trash. All the nobles' military power combined couldn't even defeat one of Duque's fingers. If it was 20 years ago, when the nobles of the 7 human kingdoms were united, they might be able to summon external forces and teach Duque a lesson for daring to challenge the rules of the nobles' game. Unfortunately, when the Storm nobles suddenly thought about it, their mouths were filled with bitterness, as if they had been forced to eat sh*t. Unknowingly, the world of the nobles had already collapsed from one disaster after another. Among the 7 human kingdoms, Stormguard had already been destroyed and had yet to recover. Dalijan had a completely different system. By the way, the current chairman, Ronan, was Duque's personal disciple. Gilnis was still surrounded by a group of werewolves, and no one knew if his kingdom had been destroyed. Apart from Stormwind, the nobles of the remaining 3 countries were basically wiped out. Alterac. After the second battle of the Dark Portal, the Horde conquered Broken Ridge, and even the nobles including Eden Pyreus were wiped out. Only Duque's bloodline was left. Although Elugia ascended to the throne, the old Duke Barev still stayed in the Marcus family's territory. The entire family and even the kingdom were in cahoots with Duque. Lordaeron. After Arthas's betrayal, the core nobles of Lordaeron were all wiped out. Only staunch local lords like Mograine were left, but they were all the most loyal knights. Kurtiras. During the third battle of the Dark Portal, the entire mainland fell, and all the nobles were wiped out. Only Queen Jaina was left. Alright, the problem was that the 3 queens mentioned above were all considered to be Duque's lovers by the nobles. Outside help? It was already good enough that Duque didn't drag the rest of the human kingdoms over to hold down the fort. How could he ask for reinforcements? Not only did they not have any external help, but they also could not defeat Duque, whose power was equivalent to that of a country's monarch. The nobles were truly aggrieved. Commotion. Both sides were embarrassed. For a moment, everyone wanted to find someone else to go against Duque. Amidst the countless, "I'm not as good as you," and "Do you think I'm an idiot?" looks, the Storm nobles realized in despair that no one could do anything to Duque. Duque didn't even take out his staff. He just stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, demonstrating what it meant to be domineering with a smile. If looks could kill, then these useless nobles would have been killed on the spot, chopped up and fed to the dogs. Now, Duque was so domineering. You can object. I can ignore it. Just like that, he used an almost barbaric manner to declare his power and force. Silence. Do not erupt in silence. Die in silence. Just like that, Duque, with a silent smile, killed the nobles' will to resist. Ha! Is there anyone else who wants to object? The gate is right there. Don't worry, as the regent of Stormwind, I have no intention of confiscating the property of those who object. After handing over the territory to the country, I will allow you to sell off the property in your territory. At the same time, I will allow you to continue to do business and live within the borders of Stormwind. Duque's attitude of, "I'm giving you a gift, but you're not thanking me for it," almost drove the nobles crazy. Rage spread through every vein in their bodies, but they couldn't vent it. They were practically suffocating to the point of suffering internal injuries. Bolvar was dumbfounded at the sight. He wanted to speak a few times, and even when the nobles he was familiar with sent him pleading looks, his heart softened a little. But after squirming a few times, he didn't say anything in the end. What reverberated in his mind was what the late King Lang had said to him when he was still alive. Bolvar, Duque's reforms, with our intelligence, we can't understand them. In fact, you and I are both mortals. We don't have Anduin's courage, nor do we have Duque's intelligence. So mortals should do what mortals do. Leave the rest to them. We only need to confirm that they are doing it for the good of the kingdom and the people. That's enough. That's right. The ones who were truly valued by the late king were Duque and Anduin. I, Bolvar, am just a person who keeps what I've accomplished. Because he knew the limits of his intelligence, Bolvar's loyalty to the House of Rin ultimately overrode the interests of these nobles. Duque forcefully suppressed Bolvar and the knights, and they didn't utter a word. The resolution, which was almost a disaster for the nobles, was passed just like that. As soon as the meeting ended, Bolvar couldn't wait to summon Duque. Almost as soon as he entered the secret meeting room, Bolvar asked, "Duque, what are you trying to do?" "Bolvar, do you really not know, or are you just pretending? Stormwind has already decayed." Duque's expression turned cold, and he threw out a stack of petitions. "I made so many reforms to make the entire kingdom rich, not to feed those vermin." Looking at the stack of petitions, Bolvar's eyes immediately closed in pain. "You won't die if you don't court death. In the past, the lords controlled their territories. Even the king had to pay tolls to the lords when he opened a railway. Now that they were used to plucking feathers from the geese, and every train had to earn a sum of money, those nobles actually joined forces to besiege him, the regent, saying that they wanted to impose special tariffs on the supply trains that passed through their territories to the Overwatch Castle in the Cursed Land. Otherwise, they would stop the train every time it passed and check if there were any prohibited items. Other than that, the nobles made all sorts of noise because the land was privately owned. Bolvar, who abided by the iron law that the nobles' territories were not the king's for 2,800 years, could do nothing about it. However, he didn't think that Duque would immediately make a move upon his return. But this is too intense. This will cause the entire ruling class of the kingdom to collapse. Then let's change it to another batch. Even if we don't do anything, they will eventually perish under the enemy's attacks. The important thing now is whether we should destroy them, or let them continue to corrupt the entire kingdom, dragging the kingdom and even all of humanity into the abyss of destruction. Is it that exaggerated? What if I told you that the loss of Varian's soul was the plot of an enemy, and that enemy just so happened to be among the nobles? Bolvar's heart instantly froze. Chapter 1092. Bolvar was an extremely principled and strong-willed man. It was true that he was pained by the depravity of the nobles, but he was a knight loyal to the king first and a noble second. He clenched his teeth and said, "As long as you have evidence, I will support you even if you have to wipe out all the nobles in Stormwind City." Duque, on the other hand, became relaxed. There's no rush. Compared to wiping out the vermin in the country, don't you think that William is more important? Bolvar's eyes immediately lit up. He pounced on Duque like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey, grabbing Duque's arms tightly. "You know where His Majesty's soul is?" William's disappearance was the biggest stain on Bolvar's record as regent. It was the deepest humiliation. From the time William disappeared to the time he was found, he had become an idiot. Bolvar's heart was constantly tormented by guilt. The late king had handed William over to Lothar before handing him over to him. He had always been strict with himself and scrupulously abided by his duties as regent. Who would have thought that something like this would happen? If not for the fact that he had to support the country, Bolvar would have committed suicide long ago. Now that Duque had suddenly mentioned William's whereabouts, how could Bolvar not be agitated? Coincidentally, when I returned from the River of Time, I saw some fragments of William's future. Coincidentally, I returned from the new main city of the elves, Teldrassil, which was not far from that place. I did my best to confirm William's safety. He had lost his memory, but his body was in good condition. "Wait, you confirmed that it wasn't His Majesty's soul?" Bolvar was shocked. "Then could it be that the His Majesty beside us is a fake?" "No, he's real too." William was unfortunate enough to be split into two by the evil magic of a certain existence. The cowardly and lazy person in the hall was him. The William on the Kalimdor continent was also him. Bolvar opened his mouth wide, stunned by this strange news. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" After entering the room, Duque had already set up a magic barrier to prevent eavesdropping, but he still made a shushing gesture. "If I say that, won't the one lurking among the nobles realize that I've seen through everything? Who the hell is that guy?" Bolvar gnashed his teeth. To think that a mysterious and powerful enemy had infiltrated right under his nose. This was definitely a dereliction of duty on his part. Duque patted Bolvar on the shoulder. "Brother, your acting is too bad. I can't tell you, but you can rest assured and leave that guy to me. I believe you. I'll leave the domestic affairs to you. I'll personally lead the troops to fetch the other emperor back." At this moment, Bolvar was like a fanatic who was obsessed with Duque. His eyes were filled with stars. Duque also felt that he had gone overboard, but with Nozdormu's endorsement, no one could expose him. To be honest, even he himself felt that this statement was a little ridiculous, but Bolvar believed it 100%. "Wait, William is not in danger. If you bring him back now, you'll only ruin his training." "You said, training?" "Yes, training. A hellish training. This is what William lacks. William is not bad, but the so-called not bad is only the standard of a mediocre king. He's not a wise king, and he's not good enough to carry the banner of the Alliance. Andoin and I have always had high hopes for William because he has the talent. Talent? Duque raised his head and looked at the ceiling. It was as if his gaze had pierced through the void and reached the river of history. There, the two ancestors, Lang and Andoin, were smiling at him. I've always believed that talent determines the height a person can reach. To reach this height, hard training is essential. William has the talent to become the leader of the Alliance, but his youth was too smooth. Too smooth? Bolvar's gaze was a little lost. Think about it. The current chief of the tribe, Sal, has a noble background, but he spent his entire childhood and adolescence as a slave gladiator in the arena. He has to face life and death battles almost every day. On the other hand, he has a real understanding of human life, society, and culture. He has knowledge and wisdom that far exceeds the level of the orcs. Furthermore, the former chief of the tribe, Orgrim, has been secretly teaching him and imparting the tribe's spirit. That's why the current wise and outstanding chief of the tribe, Thrall, was born. Bolvar was silent. Duque was right. Compared to Thrall, who had gone through hardships and tribulations, William's life had been too smooth before he turned 20. At that time, King Lang had not been assassinated. Even though he had suffered the pain of the destruction of his country, he had Duque's support for internal affairs, Andoin's support for external affairs, and Lang's protection and guidance. William, who had not truly experienced life and death, was only a little better than a flower in a greenhouse. As a loyal subject, Bolvar was more eager than anyone to see his lord's growth and metamorphosis. All right, Duque, you've convinced me. But first, I have to ensure His Majesty's safety. Sure, but I won't allow you to go, not even the royal knights. Why? Bolvar roared. Please, that place is not for holy knights. The holy light on your bodies is even more dazzling than a lighthouse in the night. Even if you send ordinary knights there. Those who only think of justice and loyalty will easily see the world as black and white and mess things up. Bolvar understood Duque's meaning. All right, I'll let MI7 arrange for an elite team of rangers to go. Duque nodded in satisfaction. Coming out of the secret room, Duque sat in his personal carriage. The two important subjects, Reginald and Edwin, as well as the two maids, Vanessa and Solarian, were already waiting there. As a Grand Duke, he still had to have the necessary extravagance. The carriage was very large, and each side was enough for one person to lie down comfortably. There were also many protective spells and anti-eavesdropping spells. Sitting opposite him, Edwin Van Cleef was the first to bow his head and admit his mistake. I'm sorry, my lord. I didn't even know that a powerful enemy had infiltrated the kingdom. It's my fault. Ha, do you know who she is now? Her. Edwin immediately reacted, even though he was not absolutely sure. Master, are you talking about Countess Enristo? Duque revealed a mysterious smile. Edwin, do you still remember Lord Presto? In the carriage, the expressions of the other four people froze. Lord Presto, this name was not unfamiliar at all. Even Solarian, who was far away in Cuel Salis, had heard of it. The fallen ancient guardian, Nisario, had once pretended to be a human lord and infiltrated the Alliance. He almost married Princess Kalia and was crowned king of Alterac. Chapter 1093. Edwin slapped his forehead in utter regret. This was a slap to his face. After all, he was in charge of the Marcus family's intelligence work. It's not your fault. Enristo and Presto are very different in pronunciation and spelling. Duque wasn't spouting nonsense. After all, the common language in the world of Azeroth wasn't English. It was still an alphabetic system, but the letters, spelling, and pronunciation weren't the same. Windsor sighed. I'm still thinking about how to dispatch troops if something happens to Stormwind City. But that's a dragon. Mortal force is meaningless. Reggie, don't move your main force. The Blackrock Beastmen will run out of the burning steps and cause trouble soon. I'll leave those guys to you. No problem. Windsor patted his chest, his eyes blazing with fighting spirit. He was 38 years old this year, the best age for a man. His martial skills hadn't declined, but he'd experienced 3 battles at the Dark Portal in one go. He was definitely an outstanding commander. Duque smiled. Reggie, fight this battle as the general of Stormwind City. You'll get what you want. Windsor's eyes lit up frighteningly. Of course he knew what Duque was talking about. The martial scepter. A marshal who wasn't even 40 years old. Just the thought of it was enough to make him go crazy with excitement. Isn't it just taking care of the Blackrock Beastmen? Don't worry. If this was 20 years ago, Duque really wouldn't be able to rest easy. But after experiencing so much, Windsor was definitely trustworthy. Edwin brought the topic back again. Who's coming this time? The female? Female? Could it be Xianxia? That's right. Too bad there's no prize. What do we do? While she's still in human form, let's. Vanessa made a throat-slitting gesture. Duque laughed. Stop joking. Only when you cut her with your dagger will you realize that her seemingly delicate neck is actually 3 feet thick. Tiske, are all giant dragons monsters? Vanessa was indignant. Science could not explain why a giant dragon that weighed in tons would turn into a delicate woman that weighed less than 100 pounds after using the ultimate transformation spell. What else could Duque say about such a fantastical world? Solarian interrupted. Then what do we do? Should he just wait like this? It doesn't seem to fit Master's personality. Solarian hadn't completely changed. After all, she hadn't spent much time with Duque. Duque didn't mind. He rested his chin on his left hand and rested his elbow on his knee. His right index finger tapped on the blue-dyed velvet cushion about 10 times rhythmically and smiled. Solarian, you're right. Although waiting is in line with my status, the status of a mortal is meaningless to a dragon. At this point, a naughty smile appeared on Duque's face. But since such a giant dragon doesn't play violence with us, and instead comes to the human world to play politics and conspiracy, wouldn't it be rude of us as the host not to play with her? Vanessa pursed her lips. Dear Master, are you sure that Elune has cleansed you of all evil powers? Damn it, Master is working, don't talk as a maid. Edwin couldn't stand watching his daughter anymore. After lecturing her, he immediately turned to Duque. Master, you spoil Vanessa too much. She's almost forgotten her duty as a maid. Duque shrugged. Yes, Master. Are you planning to destroy the entire noble class? Windsor suddenly asked. After all, every knight apprentice is taught how to serve their lord when they are young. Only by making great contributions will they be allowed to enter the noble class and rise above the rest. If Master does this, with our power, we should be able to succeed. But there will be chaos, and who will rule the country in the future? Or do you want to change Stormwind to a Dalajan parliamentary system? Or a monarchical parliamentary system like in Quel'Thos? Sigh. Duque sighed. So that's the case? This was the inevitable limitation of the people of this era. Due to the lack of productivity and poor transportation, the human kingdoms of Azeroth where Duque had transmigrated were similar to the feudal system of medieval Europe. It was simple. It would take more than a month to send an order to the furthest border. The scope of the king's authority was usually limited to his field of vision. He couldn't control anything beyond a 3-day journey, so he had to give his vassals great autonomy. Every lord was in fact a local emperor. But Duque used 20 years to promote the mechanical revolution with the steam engine as the core, and almost covered the entire territory of Stormwind. It would take less than a week to travel from Stormwind to the furthest territory. Access to roads, access to money, access to government orders. Maintaining the more primitive feudal system under such circumstances was actually hindering the development of the entire society. For example, this time, the princess of the Black Dragon Xianxia had just provoked a little, and the brainless nobles who were blinded by profits couldn't wait to jump out. On the surface, they wanted to increase taxes, but in reality, they wanted more power. Otherwise, they would threaten to abolish the railway transportation. This situation was even worse than when Xianxia provoked the Mason Brotherhood to demand back pay from the Stormwind nobles for the construction of Stormwind City. That time, the Stormwind nobles didn't pay for the construction of the city. It was a typical peasant worker demanding back pay. Of course, There was also the reason why Xianxia lied to the backbone of the Mason Brotherhood. She asked them to falsify accounts and raise the construction costs to demand money from the Stormwind nobles. The problem was that at that time, the nobles were also very poor. Naturally, the nobles thought that this was extortion. Under the Princess of the Black Dragon's provocation, the Mason Brotherhood rioted. The mole she arranged even threw stones at Varian's queen, Tiffany, to death. Varian, who knew that he was in the wrong, was still extremely lenient and exiled the Mason Brotherhood instead of starting a massacre. As a result, the Defias Brotherhood came into being. In this life, because of Duque's influence, the resources in Stormwind were extremely abundant, and the people were extremely happy. It was very difficult to incite conflict between the people and the nobles, so the nobles fought with Bolvar for power. Who would have thought that Duque would return at such a crucial time? Duque didn't want to cause too much chaos, but since Xianxia had started it, he could only carry on with the reform. Chapter 1094. Duque pondered for a moment before replying, "I have no intention of disbanding the entire noble class. To be honest, a ruler is a necessary existence. Without a ruler, the people will be in chaos. But what I, and even the entire world, need is a group of rulers who are united and actively preparing for war to face the Burning Legion and other dark forces, not maggots who dare to attack the soldiers on the front line for their own interests." "My lord, what else did you see in the River of Time?" Windsor asked. "What? Not only against the Burning Legion and the Scourge Legion, but also against the ancient elemental lords and the most evil ancient gods. Every 2 to 3 years, there will be a great battle similar to the Third Dark Portal." Duke tricked his subordinates like a charlatan. If Duque had said this 20 years ago, he would have been treated as an idiot. But humans were a race with amazing adaptability. In these 20 years, everyone had gotten used to it. No one did not believe him. Although they believed it, the expressions of the 4 people in the carriage turned serious. "Understood. Let us do what we can for our Lord. Let us pave a bright path for this world full of calamities." With Windsor in the lead, the 4 of them bowed to Duque. On the other side, the Storm nobles began to contact each other as soon as the meeting ended. However, they sadly found that they could not find anyone on their side, or even a team that could contend against Duke Marcus' tyranny. At this time, they were pleasantly surprised to find that someone had committed a crime. Countess Katrana and Risto had suddenly announced that there would be a masquerade party tonight. The kind that wore a mask and did not even need to show their faces. The Countess was so considerate that she specifically instructed the person who delivered the invitation to verbally convey that they did not even recognize the family emblem on the carriage, they only recognized the invitation and not the person. From the most powerful dukes to the insignificant barons, at least 200 to 300 nobles directly agreed to attend the banquet. Bolvar was silent for a long time when he received the news. In the shadows in front of him stood a shadowy man. He was short and capable, with deep brown eyes. "Your Excellency, what should we do?" In the end, Bolvar waved his hand. "I have already reached an agreement with Regent Marcus. I will not interfere in this matter. Moreover, doing so would obviously help the Stormwind Kingdom become a more powerful nation. You just need to focus on the Ghost Wolf mission." "Understood." The man silently retreated. Looking at the empty room, Bolvar sighed. "Duque, don't disappoint me." That night, the atmosphere was strange. As the sky gradually darkened, almost all the noble houses opened their doors, and many carriages streamed out. Some of these carriages had family emblems, while others were unemblemished carriages used by servants to purchase goods. More than 4 figures of carriages poured onto the streets at once. Even when Stormwind City was being rebuilt, Duque had designed all the main roads in the city plan to allow 6 carriages to travel side by side. The main road that ran through the entire city was even more exaggerated, with 12 lanes. However, when thousands of carriages came out at the same time in a premeditated manner, the traffic inevitably fell into chaos. If MI7 attempted to follow some of the major nobles, they were bound to go crazy, because they simply did not have enough manpower to follow every carriage and figure out who was sitting inside. However, the nobles quickly fell into doubt. Logically speaking, they would at least attract a large number of stalkers by openly confusing the line of sight. For example, there were only a few dozen elite thieves in MI7, and the rest were ordinary peripheral members. There were only about 500 of them. Moreover, with less than 1,000 thieves scattered throughout Stormwind's vast territory, apart from the Marcus family's territory, which might have fewer people, there should be at least 30 to 40 people in each district, right? The number of thieves that could really be mobilized in Stormwind City would not exceed 200. But there was not a single stalker. The nobles who wanted to participate in the masquerade party arrived without a hitch. They were not worried about being questioned by the two regents. The powerful guys had either prepared a substitute, or a few of them claimed to be playing cards together, with a group of loyal servants helping them to falsely testify. Entering Countess and Risto's magnificent manor in the east of Stormwind City that was comparable to a duke's mansion, the nobles could hear the cheerful music coming from the huge and glorious villa from afar. A band composed entirely of high elves played the most popular music from the time of Quel Salis. Sometimes cheerful, sometimes passionate, and sometimes decadent, it constantly tugged at the heartstrings of the nobles. If it wasn't for the fact that what happened today was too big, perhaps at this moment, many young noble men and women would have run to the bushes around the villa to roll around. Although it was called a masquerade party, in fact, it could only deceive outsiders. Nobles who were familiar with each other would always recognize the decorative secret codes that the other party deliberately left on their bodies. Seeing the familiar big shots arriving one by one, the young nobles were ecstatic. In their eyes, this was already enough to overthrow the whole kingdom, and even that damn Grand Duke Marcus was exiled. Unfortunately, after the banquet began, the atmosphere was very strange. Because everyone saw that the heroine of the masquerade party, Countess and Risto, who only wore a small golden mask that covered her eyes, actually ignored the other nobles and danced with a young noble under the accompaniment of music. Even the nobles close by could not hear what the two were whispering. Fortunately, they did not hear it. If they heard it, they would probably be scared out of their wits. "Dear Grand Duke Marcus, I don't remember sending you an invitation." That's right. At this moment, the person dancing with the Countess was Duque, who was wearing a ridiculous high elf mask. Of course, no one in this world would know that the two metal accessories on the mask's ears were a small version of the dragon salyer. There was also a line of Chinese written on it, "Dragon salyer, click to send." The evil Duque gently held the slender hand of the humanoid black dragon princess with one hand, enjoying the soft touch. At the same time, his other hand unscrupulously hugged her waist. Yes, from time to time, his hand would slip a little. Every time he felt the faint anger from the princess, he would put on an expression of, "My hand slipped, I'm sorry. I like crowds the most, and I have the habit of never letting go of my favorite things." Chapter 1095. You're really confident. Xianxia had a formal smile on her face. Of course. As an expert and a leader, confidence was a must. That's because you might not win with confidence, but you'll definitely lose without confidence, Duque teased without showing any weakness. Hearing this, the Black Dragon Princess laughed coldly in her heart. If you knew who I was, would you still be so confident? She didn't know that Duque was also laughing coldly in his heart. If you knew that I already knew who you were, would you still be so calm? Would you pretend that you didn't know and continue playing politics with me among the nobles? Or would you flip the table on the spot and turn into a black dragon and start fighting? Just like that, the human and the dragon looked at each other gently and even affectionately in the eyes of others. No one knew that these two fellows couldn't wait to kill each other. Xianxia laughed. Is this the confidence of the legendary Casanova Duke who conquered many queens? The Black Dragon Princess suddenly thought maliciously. If one day, Duque found out that the beauty he was very interested in was actually a black dragon, and then she would attack him violently and bite off both of his legs, how cruel and hilarious the scene would be. Maybe, maybe not. Duke's face was full of smiles as he continued to display the demeanor of a Casanova. While he was replying, he was thinking about how to numb Xianxia so that her plan wouldn't be carried out so quickly. He had to give Onyxia hope and not let her fall out so quickly. Otherwise, William would be in danger, or it might directly lead to the failure of the training, and he wouldn't be able to form the legendary iron triangle with Valilla and Ibrol. However, Duque couldn't let Onyxia stay in Stormwind City for too long. In his spatial storage, there was a remnant of a platinum disc that only had 1/5 of its original size left. It was trembling faintly. With the help of the platinum disc's power, Duque had already seen that the entire villa was filled with dragonians and half-dragons. It had to be said that the Black Dragon clan's ultimate transformation technique was very powerful. Duque wondered maliciously if those idiotic nobles knew that the waiters who were pouring wine for them, as well as the beautiful maidservants with big breasts and fair skin whom the young nobles could not even blink, were all draconids with the appearance of black-skinned lizards. What concerned Duque the most was the system elf's label on Onyxia. It wasn't strange to have a leader's mark with a white skull on a black background. What was strange was that Onyxia's mark was orange. An orange name meant that the other party's strength was much higher than his, so it was not advisable to fight him. System elf, are you kidding me? Don't I already have the platinum disc? Why is it still orange? Duque secretly asked the system in the spiritual world. The possibility of an incorrect judgment is 0.2%. According to speculation, Onyxia, who has transformed into a human, has received an unknown enhancement. Unknown strengthening, huh? Duque muttered to himself. Of course, in the eyes of the Black Dragon Princess, it meant something else. Pitiful humans, can't get rid of the shackles of tradition after all? I thought you were really so ruthless that you wanted to subvert the traditions of the entire human society. Onyxia smiled. Grand Duke Marcus, in fact, I am very grateful for your concern. But you are not my type, I prefer a more traditional man. Duque was embarrassed. Am I being labeled as a good guy? Hey, I haven't done anything yet. No, that my affection for you is just a pretense. You don't have to label me, okay? At this moment, Duque, who considered himself not handsome but elegant and invincible in the field of love, felt 100,000 tons of damage in his heart. But the act had to continue. Tradition is essentially a good thing, but tradition must also adapt to the changes of the times. Don't you think that a great man like me, who has adapted to the development of the new era, is a better choice for you? Duque smiled, hinting with a double meaning. On the surface, he was picking up girls, but in fact, he was hinting that holding on to the traditions of feudal territories would not end well. Onyxia was a rare dragon with a high level of political wisdom. She immediately determined that Duque was actually trying to recruit her. The Black Dragon Princess sneered inwardly, hee. It turns out that the great hero Duque, who even dared to kill my dead father, is actually afraid of a civil war in Stormwind? Humans' shackles to their homeland and oaths to the dead are boring enough. But it is precisely like this that he is more like a human. Duke Marcus, just wait for me to thoroughly destroy your cherished Stormwind. Onyxia was not feigning civility, but a decisive refusal. Her voice suddenly became slightly louder, loud enough for a few nobles nearby to hear. I believe that it is precisely because of the inheritance of civilization and norms that humans can be distinguished from the barbaric beastmen, filthy trolls, and other races, and become recognized as a highly intelligent race. Humans who have abandoned their inheritance are no different from beasts, so give up. Rather than lowering my noble head and kneeling in the mud under your despotism, I will choose to use my own method to say no to injustice and tyranny. Onyxia's words were so righteous and awe-inspiring. If Duque didn't know that the person in front of him was a female black dragon, even he himself would have almost believed it. He even shed a few tears of gratitude. A dragon's life is like a play, and it all depends on acting skills. All right, your black dragon family is a best actor and best actress. I will carve the word admire on a sweet potato when I return. Duque showed a pitiful expression. It's such a pity that Countess Enristo has such a deep prejudice against me. I hope that time can bridge the gap between us. Some scars cannot be healed by time, Best Actress Onyxia replied coldly. Just in time, the song ended. Duque could only reluctantly let go of Onyxia. Of course, as a big antagonist to the nobles, how could he not leave some harsh words before he left? Is that so? Actually, when it comes to persuasion, I personally prefer conquest. Let's call it a day. I think we will have a deeper conversation in the council hall. Yes, we will. Unknowingly, a large group of nobles had stood behind the countess. Now everyone knew that it was Duque who came to demonstrate his power. But some things were like this. After shedding all pretenses of cordiality, they would become fearless. It was precisely because of Duque's appearance that more wavering nobles began to join Countess Enristo's camp. It was all because of Duque. Leaving the villa in a carefree manner, Duque really wanted to laugh. If the flag bearer they followed was really a human, perhaps there would be a Stormwind version of Joan of Arc. Unfortunately, they followed a female black dragon. Chapter 1096. Just like that, under the murderous gazes of countless nobles and a large number of Dragonians who were ostensibly servants, Duque strode away unhurriedly. He even threw off the mask on his face and revealed his true face. He turned around and smiled mysteriously at the nobles who had followed him to the gate. This, of course, was met with a wave of exclamations and sighs. Even if this was a declaration of war, even if Duque had completely stood on the opposite side of the traditional nobles, the boldness of going deep into the enemy's territory alone still made the nobles gasp in admiration. In the eyes of the nobles, Countess Katrana Enristo also stood with her head held high and chest out. She stood at the gate and raised her slender and beautiful hand, and the last piece of golden mask that covered her face suddenly flew into the sky. Two pairs of black eyes that were as deep and mysterious as the universe shot out divine lights and collided passionately in the air. Although Du Peng wanted to describe it as a kitchen knife cutting through a wire, but in the eyes of the nobles, this was a spectacular scene of tigers and wolves staring at each other. They were excited. The traditional nobles finally had a standard-bearer at this moment. A standard-bearer who was not afraid of the evil Duke Marcus's monstrous power and strength. Beautiful Lady Katrana, you are not fighting alone. You are not alone. More and more nobles stood behind Katrana, who was like a saintess descending to the world. Some nobles even pinned their family insignia. Even though they had not taken off their masks, they were standing on the side. The ridiculous herd mentality was fully displayed at this moment. Almost every noble was thinking, that's right. I am a great noble conferred by the late king. As long as I do not commit treason, no one can confiscate my territory. I am the master of my territory. If you, Duque, forcibly take away our power, then be prepared for a civil war. Looking at the large army of nobles, Duque almost laughed until his stomach cramped. After snorting, Duque turned around and no longer looked in the direction of the villa. At the gate, a gorgeous carriage with a blue and white background and the Marcus family's tornado family emblem rushed over at high speed. With an almost elegant movement, the carriage stopped in front of Duque. The driver was one of the famous 5 silver sages, Gavin Rad Misfortune. This holy knight, who had once been exiled to the outside world and was now a grand marshal of both Stormwind and the Alliance, had just been confirmed to be alive. He, Daneth Trollbane and Kale, had successfully built a bridgehead fortress not far from the Hellfire Peninsula where the Dark Portal was located, Fort Glory. However, the space near the Door of Darkness was too unstable. It was only with Kale, that's full strength, that he managed to return a week ago. As soon as he returned, he used this method to express his support for Duque. It's really unfair for a marshal like you to be my driver. Duque smiled. It would be my honor to be the driver for the Alliance's commander. Gavin Rad smiled as well. Duque entered the carriage with large strides. Naturally, there were his 2 maids who were very good at fighting, as well as Edwin. Defan, who was supposed to be the leader of the Defias Brotherhood, could not help but ask, is it really good to leave them alone? No problem, let the bullets fly for a while. What Duque said was a famous saying from that world. In the ears of the other 3, there was naturally an unusual taste. Dwarves were good with guns, so they naturally had bullets. In the eyes of mortals, as long as the gun was fine and the target was aimed, it would hit. In the eyes of experts, even the fastest bullet was nothing more than a flying tool. Shields deflecting bullets, godly evasion, muscles clamping bullets, these were really nothing. This was the difference between realms. A difference that was enough to make others feel deep respect. Unknowingly, Solarian had been Duque's maid for 5 years. Even though Duque was thrown into the War of the Ancients most of the time and kept busy, this did not stop Solarian from finding opportunities to understand her master. Solarian had originally thought that since Duque had chosen to save Kale, that's the prince she had followed before, she had to fulfill her promise. Everything was out of a promise and obligation. As she learned more about Duque's past, she began to understand why so many people around Duque followed Duque without any complaints or regrets. Even though Duque was not around, they still firmly carried out the policies that Duque had left behind. They firmly believed and looked forward to Duque's return. Perhaps, only such a man can truly save this world that is plagued with disasters. Solarian muttered silently in her heart. Duque did not care about Solarian's sensitive thoughts. In his opinion, a human maid who had regained the appearance of an 18-year-old and a beautiful elven maid with a shelf life of tens of thousands of years was enough as eye candy. Duque had deliberately allowed the incident to ferment, and he had this excuse. This was because on January 2nd, year 21 of the Dark Portal, which was the day after New Year's Day, the Alliance would hold a meeting. This meeting was of great significance. It was not only the 20th anniversary of the Alliance, but also to welcome the Night Elves to join the Alliance. And according to the agreement made by the various countries at the end of the Third War of the Dark Portal 5 years ago, the Alliance would no longer have a leader. Instead, a standing leader would be elected every 5 years, and a new Alliance commander and deputy commander would be elected. Last time, because of urgent matters, after Duque returned from the void where Karazhan was, he took the position of Alliance commander for a time. Later, because of the Archimonde curse, he resigned. Now that Duque had returned and announced that he was fine, everyone knew that this was just a formality. The position of Alliance commander would definitely belong to Duque. This was just like when the leaders of the Celestial Empire went on a visit before Duze, and then, conveniently, signed a number of trade contracts. In fact, they had already been signed and negotiated, and only announced at once. Since the birth of the Alliance, there had been a total of 3.5 commanders. The first was Anduin Lothar. He was the least controversial. If it were not for Duque's dazzling achievements, he would probably have been given the title of God of War. The second was Alexandros Mograine. Although he was rigorous in his use of troops, it had been proven many times that his ability was limited to one army. With 200,000 troops, he could give you the effect of 400,000 troops. Give him 400,000 troops, and it was still 400,000. The third was Duque. His dazzling achievements were enough for him to be recognized as the God of War. The only thing that restricted him previously was that he could not get the support of the Rotterdam Kingdom. The remaining half was William, who could be considered an apprentice under Lothar. All the kings knew who the best candidate was. What was more rare was that Duque had started his career early, had the best achievements, and had the best achievements. All the kings respected him. If there were no accidents, Duque could be the commander for at least another 30 years. As long as Duque did not announce that the Alliance would become an empire, everyone would respect him. Under such an atmosphere, the leaders of the various countries who arrived at Rotterdam on the 1st of January seemed extremely harmonious. Chapter 1097. During the first years of the Dark Portal, rapid travel through teleportation portals was something unimaginable to most people. With the development of magical technology, directional teleportation portals had been greatly improved in the past 20 years. During the first Alliance conference, the kings of the various countries had taken ships and carriages to rush to the conference. Now, teleportation portals were all in place. Those who could become the rulers of a country all had to deal with a myriad of issues. As long as it was safe, no one would have the time to waste on the road. In Teldrassil, Tyron's trusted aide Melland was still feeling uneasy. I wonder if the kings of the various countries will give us the cold shoulder now that we've joined the Alliance? In fact, the nature faction had the same worries. Fandral Staghelm even publicly expressed that Tyron's actions were akin to being cold-shouldered. However, the Night Elves were more inclined towards the alliance. After all, on one side was a pleasant-looking fellow, while on the other side was either Bonehead or the green-skinned beastman who had killed their demigod Cenarius. However, no matter how they thought about it, it was better to actually pay them a visit. I won't. Tyron smiled gently. Yes, Your Excellency High Priest, has anything happened recently? I feel like you're in a good mood and you're glowing. Is that so? You must be imagining things. Tyron turned her head away, blushing. Time's up. Stepping through the teleportation portal that was opened by the Dalaran wizard who was sent ahead of time, the Night Elves only felt a sense of dizziness. They had not experienced the feeling of space deviation ever since they exiled their compatriots, the Blood Elves who now called themselves Sindorii. It was a very short feeling, lasting only a few seconds. By the time they came back to their senses, they were already in a wide passageway that wasn't too long. The portal was less than 10 meters away. Sentinels, puff out your chests. Melon's idea was to display the might of the Night Elves. Unexpectedly, as soon as they stepped out, a female figure in a blue and white wizard robe quickly walked up to them. Sister Tyrant, we meet again. Her tone was calm, but her actions were passionate. Under the gaze of Melon and the Sentinels, the crowned Queen Jaina rushed up and hugged Tyrant. Her actions were extremely intimate, as if they were sisters who had been separated for many years. You're the queen. Pay attention to your image. Although she said it was a reminder, Tyrant's tone was as if she was doting on her own sister. Melon was shocked. She hadn't seen the two of them being so intimate the last time they worked together to kill Archaron on Mount Hyjal. What the hell happened? Sister, sit in my carriage. Jaina pointed at her royal carriage. Then I'll have to trouble you, sister. Tyrant smiled gently and waved at Melanie, motioning for them to follow her. She then boarded the carriage without hesitation. After all, the mana consumption of the teleportation portal depended on the size and weight of the object being transported. Tyrant did not bring her famous white tiger with her, so she could only rely on the Alliance to provide transportation. With Kurdalas, the queen of the earliest member of the Alliance, leading the way, it was the best way for the Night Elves to integrate into the Alliance. Along the way, Tyrant and Jaina chatted happily in the carriage. Melon and the other Sentinels were filled with curiosity. As soon as they arrived at the newly built Lordaeron Palace, they bumped into the Queen of Sindorii, Sylvanas, and the Queen of Alterac, Elucia. Without any formal greetings, Elucia came up and gave Tyrant a warm hug. Sister, welcome to the Lordaeron continent. After the meeting, you can come to my South Sea city if you have time. Sylvanas came up and gave her a hug as well. Sister, we meet again. Sylvanas' tone was slightly calmer, but everyone could see that she was friendly towards Tyrant. Elves of two different skin colors, two leaders hugging each other. To the Night Elves who had been isolated for thousands of years, this was a historic moment. Some of the older Night Elf sentries felt their noses tingle. The two elves were ultimately of the same origin. It was purely a difference in ideology that caused them to split. Who would have thought that after the ancient war 10,000 years ago, the Night Elves and Blood Elves would fight side by side again? Compared to Jaina and Elucia's enthusiasm, Sylvanas was more reserved. She and Tyrant had another topic in common: shooting. Tyrant was a priestess and archer. She was also very skilled in archery. The two strongest archers of this era chatted as they walked side by side. The two queens in front were even more affectionate. Elucia and Jaina were holding hands as they walked as if they were shopping. Behind them, Melanie and the sentries were dumbfounded. As if they had arranged to meet, Duque had arrived with the Windrunner sisters. Duque gestured elegantly. Tyrant, welcome to Lordaeron. Actually, you've already met the 3 Windrunner sisters. But please allow me to formally introduce you. Aurelia and Sasha are the leaders of the newly formed organization, Silver Dawn. Doesn't it sound fake? There's no other way. This is an official meeting. Even though they've already met each other sincerely and reached a consensus, They had no choice but to introduce each other in public. Aurelia held Tyrant's hands and said elegantly, "Welcome, Sister Tyrant." Silver Dawn is a civil organization with the High Elves as its core. Its goal is to fight against the Scourge. However, we are directly under the command of the Alliance. If you have any missions against the Scourge, please call us sisters. We'll definitely have many opportunities to interact. Tyrant looked at Duque. Just as she was about to say something, a rough and strong voice suddenly sounded. "Don't mix with the women. Come and drink with me. This time, we'll drink you until you're unconscious and get the good stuff out of your stomach." The two short wintermelons seemed to have rolled over, directly carrying the dumbfounded Duke up and ran. Tyrant gaped. "That's the Dwarven King of Ironforge, Magni Bronzebeard, and his third brother, Bulang," Aurelia replied. "Don't mind those stinky men. We're having a party tonight. Remember to come." Sasha, who was the most active, whispered into Tyrant's ears. While official negotiations were important when it came to interactions between nations, personal relationships were also important. If one attended the meeting but did not even have a private conversation, then the visit would undoubtedly be a failure. The first and second day were all given to the kings to chat in private. It was obvious that Tyrant was not excluded from the Alliance's circle. Chapter 1098. On the first of the day, Tyrant was busy greeting the leaders of the various countries. Thanks to the battle at Mount Hyjal and her relationship with Durin, they were all on good terms. Of course, the final victor would still be the private gathering at night. At 10 at night, Tyrant arrived at the guest house of Sin Dorii under the protection of sentries. Along the way, not only were there sentries every few steps, but there were also teams of elite guards patrolling the area. There was also a large three-dimensional protective magic formation set up by the Arcanists of Sin Dorii. The security was so tight that it left one speechless. Looking at the solemn and nervous expressions of the guards, Melon subconsciously thought that they were about to hold an important meeting that concerned the survival of the world. Seeing how relaxed High Priestess Tyrant looked, holding a thin bag in her left hand and humming a song as she went to the meeting, Melon finally couldn't hold it in anymore. "Sister, is it really okay to be so casual?" As a member of the Alun Sisterhood, this was how they addressed the older and higher priestesses. Tyrant smiled. "Sister, it's fine. I'm really just going to make friends. The tight security is just a trick to fool outsiders." "Really?" Tyrant's casual tone didn't match the solemn atmosphere at all. Under the guidance of the leader of the Blood Elf Paladins, Liadeline, Tyrant and the others finally arrived at the basement of the guest house. In such a secluded place? Could it be a trap? Melon couldn't help but gulp. Just what kind of battle of words was waiting for him in front of him? At the entrance, the stern-faced female guards opened the door. The heavy door creaked open. Suddenly, an unimaginable wave of voices came rushing at them. "Catch her! Don't let her get away!" The voice giggled. "Boo! You sisters are bullying me." The female voice sounded aggrieved. "Jaina, don't use magic," someone complained. Then Sasha, "Put away your rubber arrows first," someone protested. Melland recognized every voice. But Melland didn't dare to confirm it. In the next second, a slender figure in disheveled clothes rushed through the tall, opaque entrance and rushed to the door. Mellander's jaw dropped. This was the famous master of Theramore, Queen Jaina Proudmore of Cultivation. The problem was that Jaina was wearing a silver bra, a translucent light blue nightgown and a pair of silver briefs. "Sister Tyrant, come quickly." The Windrunner sisters were bullying him. "Let's do 3 against 3. Jaina grabbed Tyrant's hand anxiously. In the blink of an eye, a white pillow flew across the air and hit Jaina's head. Jaina immediately let out a whimper that sounded like a small animal. Woo! Then the stitches on the pillow seemed to loosen, and the snow-white velvet inside flew out in all directions. "Sure. I will join the battle." Tyrant smiled as she took off her clothes, revealing a body that Melanie could not help but think was perfect no matter how many times she looked at it. She then put on a white nightgown. Tyrant, who had always looked holy and noble, turned to look at her confidant with a reproachful expression. "What are you looking at? Have you never seen a slumber party or a pillow fight before?" Melander was stunned. "Sister, this is a custom passed down from the humans." Tyrant chuckled as she threw a pillow back at Melander. This time, it was Sasha who hugged her head and whimpered. It was hard to describe Melander's current embarrassment. But this was probably a good thing. "Sister, have fun," Melander said almost subconsciously. "Yes, I will. Come and get me when the sun rises." With that, Tyrant threw another pillow that could twist and turn at Sylvanas, who was dodging at high speed. The heavy door slowly closed. Melander stood there in a daze as if he had just seen a new world. After a long while, he asked Riadaline, "Do all the queens of the Alliance like to play like this?" Riadaline put her hands on her hips and sighed. "Of course not. This is a small circle that you don't know about. Poor Queen Kalia couldn't get in even after waiting for 20 years. Melander was confused. Regardless, Melander still felt happy for Tyrant. As someone close to her, she knew how Tyrant had lived for the past 10,000 years. Politically, she had to exile her fellow High Elves and face Fandrel's provocations. Privately, she had rejected the Stormrage brothers because of that incident. Although Tyrant's face was always filled with warmth and kindness, she had never been happy on the inside. It had been a long time since she had seen her happy. What happened to Tyrant? Why did she suddenly change after a trip to the gushing spring lake? What she didn't know was that Duque, the key person in this matter, was about to vomit. F***, I should never have taught the method of distilling liquor to those damn dwarves. The drunken Duque looked at the corpses of the 4 dwarves in the hall of the Steel Stove Castle State Guesthouse. Magni, Kudrin, Jurbin, and Bulang. Duque was furious. His boss was drunk, so someone had to clean up the mess. The guards of the Steel Stove Castle came in and dragged their boss away as if they were used to it. On Duque's side, a maid came to his rescue. "Master, according to you, you're asking for it." Vanessa spat out her poisonous tongue. "Ugh, send me back to the Storm State Guesthouse. Aurelia and the others are having a pajama party." Vanessa purposely provoked Duque. Duque imagined it. It was a scene that could reach the level of killing a virgin. But not now. That bastard Magni saw that he couldn't win with just one type of wine, so he mixed it with another. In the end, even if Duque won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Those vodka-like things had been specially added with some kind of bubble drink. Once he drank it, the smell of alcohol would rush to his head. Even though Duque had used all his magic circuits and had the system elf help his body detoxify, his combat ability was still reduced by more than half. Asking Duque to go there now was like sending himself to his death. Duque shook his head like a rattle drum. Be good and send me back to the guest house." Vanessa agreed. But in a place where Duque didn't notice, Vanessa smiled as if she had succeeded. Groggy, Duque first went to the toilet to vomit. Then, he let Vanessa help him wipe his body and fell on the bed like a dead dog. "System elf, other than those on the safety list, if anyone else comes near, you have to wake me up even if you use electric shock." "Understood. Don't worry, host." Chapter 1099. The feeling of a hangover was terrible. His head was splitting, and he clearly wanted to sleep, but he couldn't. He breathed heavily into the room, and the stench of alcohol made him want to vomit. Unfortunately, he had already vomited everything he could, and the rest had entered his blood vessels. He could only hope for his liver to break down more alcohol enzymes so that he could sober up faster. In a daze, Duque noticed that someone was touching him. The system genie showed a green light. That meant he was on the same side. Duque didn't care. Anyway, he was a weakling now, and he was counting on others to serve him. That person took advantage of the darkness to come up, and her soft little hands groped him. Then, Duque realized that she seemed to be using armor break on him. "Don't worry about me. Let me sleep." The other party seemed to be startled, but then came a mosquito-like reply, "Okay." Wait. Something seemed wrong. Although his body senses were rather slow, Duque could still feel the strange touch when the other party was gently and carefully sharpening Duque's godly sword. Duque forced his heavy eyelids open and saw a blonde head. Without long ears, was it a human? The only blonde human female around him was Jaina, but Jaina definitely didn't have this kind of hair that reached her waist. Duque suddenly woke up. He finally saw who it was and cried out involuntarily, "Kali?" Like a stupid thief who had been caught stealing for the first time, Kalia froze, completely at a loss for what to do. However, in the next moment, 2 lines of tears rushed out of Kalia's eyes and slid down her still elegant cheeks. "If it's me, can't I do anything? Duque, do you hate me that much?" The moonlight shone into the room, making Kalia's bright blonde hair shine. Time passed, but the years still left traces on the face and body of this once beautiful princess. Under the moonlight, there were already some crow's feet at the corners of Kalia's eyes. Kneeling at the end of the bed, her unreserved female body was full of the traces of a mature woman. Sitting up, Duque suddenly sighed, "It's been 20 years. That's right. It had been 20 years. From the very beginning, when they first met, there were a few short but interesting conversations. Then he helped Kalia fake her death. Then, 5 years ago, when Arthis killed his father, he forced Kalia to return to Lordaeron to ascend to the throne. It had been 20 years since then. Actually, ever since Duque found out from Vanessa that Kalia refused to use his eternal blessing, Duque knew Kalia's decision. Returning to her youth was seen by her as a breakup gift, but Kalia refused to accept it. Therefore, she would rather appear in front of Duque in her youthful appearance. Her tears were still flowing, causing Duque's heart to ache. Yeah. It's been 20 years, but in these 20 years, I've never regretted even for a second. Kalia's voice was still crisp and soft. It was like an awl that pierced straight into Duque's heart. Duque's mouth moved for a long time, and he let out a long sigh. "You're so silly. I've always done those things purely because I don't want the heavens to destroy your beauty." Leaning over lightly, Kalia sat on Duque's knees and put her hands on Duque's shoulders. "So what? The only one who saved me from that cage called the palace was Duque. The only one who gave me the most regretless youth and let me enjoy 10 years of freedom that I couldn't even dream of was Duque. Maybe in your eyes, I'm just a passerby. But in my eyes, you're all I have. So, even if I don't want to return to Lordaeron, as long as it's your wish, I'll do it." Duque was silent. Kalia's forehead gently touched Duque's forehead, and her tears flowed even more. "I'm sorry. I know that you like the Windrunner sisters the most, and I know that you don't like me, but I really like you too much, and I love you too much. In the beginning, I was willing to wait silently. But you accidentally went away for 10 years, and immediately after you came back, there was a fierce battle, and then you disappeared for more than 4 years. What else could Duque say? He was also very helpless. It was always the void or the river of time. If sorry works, I'm willing to say it 100,000 times, 1,000,000 times. But I really don't want to lie to myself anymore, and wait like a fool. I've waited for 20 years, and I really can't accept that I won't have any emotional interaction with you in the future, and that I'll end my life like this. So, even if what I'm going to do next is wrong, please forgive me, okay?" After saying that, Kalia wanted to act recklessly. Who knew that Duque would suddenly push her away? Kalia was extremely shocked. "Weren't you drugged?" Needless to ask, it must be someone close to him who was a spy. He shouldn't have let Vanessa stay by Kalia's side in the first place. Damn it, a good maid has become bad. Duque's face twitched. "Damn it, Vanessa, you bastard maid, I'll deal with you later." In the maid's room outside the door, even though the soundproofing was good, Vanessa, who was not asleep, suddenly felt a chill. Turning back, fiercely looked at Kalia. "Idiot woman. You even gave up your last chance to escape from my clutches. Don't blame the world for your stupidity. You're finished. Just wait to become my collection for eternity." After Duque's malicious words, Kalia's tears turned into laughter. "Good. I've waited for this day for 20 years. Take this, watch my throat slash." Duque's godly sword stabbed forward, and the cruel sword edge instantly pierced through. Kalia was like a swan that had been shot by a sharp arrow. Her long and perfect neck was stretched to the limit because of the pain, and the tears that had already been gushing out were like a broken dam. But this time, they were tears of joy. At the same time, because of the pain, her throat seemed to be sealed, and she could not say a single word. That's right, Duque was indeed very rough, but for a woman who was crazy for love and was willing to throw herself at him like a moth to a flame, for a woman who had waited for 20 years and was not willing to wait for even a second more was torture. This was just right. Duque, Kalia seemed to want to pour out the feelings that had accumulated in her heart for 20 years. She did not do anything, but cried out Duque's name the whole time, unknowingly. It was dawn. Duque, that eternal blessing, I'd better use it. Otherwise, I won't have confidence in front of those beautiful sisters who won't age. Chapter 1100. On the 2nd of January, Queen Kalia suddenly summoned the ministers of the Rotterdam kingdom urgently. A large number of nobles looked at the radiant queen on the throne in astonishment, completely speechless. In order to avoid suspicion, Duque asked Kalia to ingest the blessing of eternal life in stages. The changes would not be too obvious in a short period of time. However, just because her appearance did not change did not mean that her spirit did not change. The old ministers, Mograine and Abendis, knew that the queen had not been happy in the past few years. However, they had no choice. Kalia was the only legitimate heir of the royal family. If they did not support her to ascend the throne, all the people of the Rotterdam kingdom would be like wandering ghosts. They would lose their loyalty and cohesion. That was a deep-rooted concept that had been rooted in this land for 2,800 years and had been passed down for countless generations. Since the day the queen ascended the throne, the old ministers had been worried about the continuation of the royal bloodline. Even though there were countless young nobles in the country who had launched an emotional attack on Queen Kalia, they were all chased away and killed. Everyone knew that Queen Kalia only had one him in her heart. The problem was that although that guy was good, no one knew where he had died all year round. Besides, he had a few queens who had an unclear relationship with him. The people of the Rotterdam kingdom could accept an extremely powerful husband, but they would never accept their queen running off to be a lover. All right, Queen Kalia, who had been frowning and forcing a smile since Lin Li's disappearance, suddenly changed 180 degrees today. Considering the news of Lin Li's visit, Mograine and Abendis looked at each other and saw the same answer in each other's eyes. Sigh. Still unable to escape from Duque's clutches? Queen Kalia said, "Once upon a time, I also thought that noble bloodline was everything. Obviously, this thinking is wrong. The great commander of the alliance, Duke Marcus, once said something that I deeply agree with. People are noble because of their great deeds, not because of their bloodline." The queen's words caused a commotion among the ministers. They were too embarrassed to interrupt the queen because she had not finished speaking. True nobles, such as Anduin Lothar, have the noblest sentiments and the grandest thoughts. When he discovered that Thoradin the Great's bloodline was a restriction to the various human kingdoms, and even to the growing number of races in the alliance, he decisively chose to end the noblest bloodline in his own hands. As for the despicable, even if they have the so-called noble bloodline, just like my brother Arthas who killed my father, King Tyrrhenus, they will also do things that will anger the gods. The mention of Arthas was an eternal pain in the hearts of all the people of Rotterdam. He killed his father and annihilated all the nobles and citizens of the Rotterdam city. He even spread the plague and death throughout most of the Rotterdam kingdom's territory. If it weren't for the fact that the various countries had suffered great losses and were unable to go on an expedition to Northrend, the people of the Rotterdam kingdom would have long gone to take revenge. Now that Kalia said that Arthas was a despicable person with a noble bloodline, it was really hard to refute. Especially when Kalia said this as the only heir of the Menethil royal family, no one dared to object. Queen Kalia stood up. She seemed to have some difficulty moving, but her beautiful appearance combined with her righteousness made her soft voice sound powerful. 2,800 years ago, my ancestor opened up the then barren Tirisful forest for the humans, so he was honored as king from the leader of a clan. 2,800 years later, Arthas was stripped of his right to be king because of his heinous crimes. With history as a mirror, only people with both talent and virtue are qualified to be king. So if there is such a day, someone more suitable than me to lead Rotterdam appears, even if his surname is not Menethil, I, Kalia Menethil, will not be stingy with my throne. I will abdicate. The words of a king were an oath that was thousands of times more serious than a nail on a board. In a sense, Kalia's words were like opening a Pandora's box with her own hands. For people who were greedy for power, this was undoubtedly asking for trouble. But everyone knew that Kalia had said more than once that she did not want to be queen. This was completely forcing a duck onto a perch. If it was not Duque looking for her, but someone else, she would definitely not be willing to come back. It was originally like this in history. It was only when the Burning Legion's universe fleet played large-scale landing battles around Azeroth that Kalia, who had been missing for almost 30 years, resolutely came out of seclusion and participated in this war against evil. Mograine and Abendis sighed. 2 days ago, they heard that Duque was in Stormwind City against the nobles and wanted to implement large-scale reforms. They did not expect Kalia to be the first to take the lead to support Duque today. Think about it, even the queen of the old powerful Rotterdam took the lead to announce that only sages could be kings. What right did the small nobles in the south have to cling to the so-called aristocratic regulations from 2,800 years ago? This was simply a slap in the face to the nobles of Stormwind City. Kalia did not give the nobles of Rotterdam any room to refute, and directly announced the end of the meeting. One could imagine that the wave of sages being kings that would be set off next would sweep through the entire human world. After the meeting, Kalia quickly went to the side hall. Jaina was already waiting at the door. Sister Kalia. Sister Jaina. The two queens hugged each other intimately. They had been best friends since they were very young. After all, they were both princesses and were close in age. But later, as Jaina was married to Duque by King Therin and left for the Elven Forest, the two had no choice but to alienate each other. Unexpectedly, after a big circle, they were back together again. Jaina brought Kalia into the side hall. Only then did Kalia realize that the queens and leaders were already there. Seeing Kalia's awkward walk, Jaina snickered and laughed maliciously. Speaking of which, Duque is a big jerk. He had to torment us human girls. The three of us were going to chase him. Elves are all very loving. That's not it. He wasn't gentle to me at all. I insisted that I didn't want him, but he still bullied me regardless and forced me to learn those shameful things. The pure and holy Tyrant seemed to be reminiscing as she held her face in her hands. The other 6 were shocked. As the high priestess of the moon goddess, Tyrant had turned into a female chauffeur. When she suddenly started racing, a pure girl like Kalia could not afford to be hurt. Illusia could only change the topic in embarrassment. But is it really okay for you to do this? I'm immortal. I'm not a talented person. If I take the throne, there might be all sorts of bad things that will happen. Why don't you take advantage of the fact that Mograine and the other old ministers are still here to arrange things and find a chance to retire? Chapter 1101. Not every queen was like Kalia, who said to let go and then let go. It had nothing to do with greed for power. It was purely determined by one's ability and personality. Kalia did not have any special talents. She was not strong in battle, and she was not as good at internal affairs as Illusia. However, she was more suitable to be a spiritual leader than anyone else. Since her ability was at the level of a mascot, she might as well retire early and have a peaceful life. Otherwise, without external protection, she would get into trouble sooner or later while sitting on the throne. She would either become a puppet or lose her life due to a betrayal. At that moment, Duque came in. Seeing the harmonious atmosphere, he rubbed his nose in embarrassment. The throne meeting is about to begin. Everyone, get ready. Just as he was about to run, Queen Sylvanas suddenly put a hand on Duque's shoulder. Feeling guilty, Duque was immediately petrified. I swear I won't add any more sisters for you. Duque surrendered first. Pfft. Sasha burst out laughing. Second sister, you scared him. The others in the harem also smiled. Only Kalia buried her face in Jaina's chest, not daring to look at anyone. Queen Sylvanas could not even be angry. She put her hands on her hips. No. We discussed it all night at the pajama party and came to a conclusion. What conclusion? Queen Sylvanas seemed to have lost her temper. I really don't know if you did it on purpose or not. We sisters are either queens or leaders. Most of us are so busy that we don't have time to accompany you all day. None of us can let go of our careers or our people. And the world is getting more and more dangerous, so we can only let you take advantage of us, you little bastard. Unknowingly, these beauties had gathered around Duque. Their beautiful eyes wandered and finally landed on the oldest tyrant. Tyrant smiled. Duque, you are someone who can do great things. Perhaps the safety of the entire world of Azeroth rests on your shoulders. Since we are willing to follow you, we do not want to burden you anymore. Instead of crushing you to the point where you can't breathe, it's better to let go and let you soar freely. Aurelia, who was the first to become Duque's woman, said, Yes. We have an agreement, as long as you make all the sisters happy first. Do as you wish. Although Du-Muk was touched, his facial muscles were still twitching. An infinite harem sounds great, doesn't it? However, the prerequisite was that he had to please all of these ladies. Only then would he be able to increase his happiness by one. Duque suddenly felt that one of Gu Tianla's words was very true. A man's energy is limited, but the number of girls in this world was limitless. Using a limited amount of energy to bombard an unlimited amount of girls, this in itself is a losing battle. If he continued to act recklessly, he would only be finding trouble for himself. Duque spoke righteously and with the aura of an honest and reliable young master. He raised 3 fingers and said, I swear. Before they could make their vows, the heavens suddenly sent a bolt of lightning from the clear sky, as if a group of fellow Taoists were going through a tribulation. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. After a while, there was a downpour, followed by sleet and snow. Even Tyrant, who looked so serious, laughed, not to mention the other younger ladies. Ha! Ha! Sasha, who had the most carefree personality, laughed so hard that her stomach hurt. She laughed so hard that she almost choked on her breath. She stopped teasing Duque. According to their ages, first Tyrant, then the 3 Windrunner sisters, followed by Lucia, Kalia, and Jaina. All of them came up to him and gave him hot kisses. No more, no less. It was as if they were on a stopwatch, each kiss lasting 10 seconds. These people were all immortal or long-lived races that could easily live for more than 10,000 years. For example, Tyrant received Teldrassil's blessing when she was 3,000 years old, and her age was frozen until recently. The first 100 years of an elf's life were considered their childhood, and the last 100 years were considered their old age. The rest of the time in between was considered their youth. Therefore, even the oldest Tyrant and Aurelia were only about 25 years old by human standards. Looking at such a harem, Duque was so happy that he almost fainted. Duque's moral integrity was very full, except when he was dissatisfied. There's nothing wrong with that. When Tyrant privately brought up how to solve the beastman's logging problem, Duque patted his chest and promised to leave it to him. That night, there was a formal welcome banquet. At the same time, it was announced that the Night Elves had officially joined the Alliance, and a grand ceremony was held. The Candlelight Club spent 4 years in this city, using a full set of mechanical equipment to fill in the ruins of Lordaeron. They then rebuilt Lordaeron by the lake to the west of the ruins, and held a grand bonfire party. Music could be heard everywhere, and the streets were filled with joyful and joyous Alliance people. During the throne meeting on the 3rd of January, the decision to let Duque, who had been cleansed of his curse, return to being the Alliance's commander was unanimously approved. At the same time, in order to deal with the possible crisis of the Burning Canyon and Burning Steppes, the Iron Furnace Fort would be the Alliance's leader for the next 5 years. The ceremonial officer announced, "Let's welcome the tribe's emissary, the Darkspear Trolls leader, Wuxia. Wuxia came in, one hand on his chest, and bowed to the alliance's leader, Magni, and the commander, Duque. I bring greetings from the tribe's chief, Sar. At the same time, as comrades who once fought side by side against the evil Burning Legion, the chief hopes that we can solve the dispute over the wood in a peaceful way now that the Night Elves have announced their participation in the alliance. Sar had sent the wisest Wuxia, and not some beast man who only had muscles left in his brain. He had good intentions in the first place. Of course, only Dooku and the other leaders who were wise enough to understand the tribe could see this. If we can get along, we are brothers. If we can't, we are strangers. The dwarves have never been afraid of anyone who dares to use force, Magni said with a heroic look. If anyone thought that the dwarf king was a fool, they would definitely be tricked to death. Because his next words were, Duque, I don't know the situation there, so I'll leave it to you. Tyrande also spoke at the right time. Since the Night Elves have officially joined the alliance, I believe the alliance will give us a solution that will satisfy both sides. Duque raised his eyebrows. All right, first of all, does the Night Elves agree to let the tribe enter Grey Valley to cut wood? Tyrande shook her head. Apologies, trees are not just a simple resource for the Night Elves. Most of the trees in Grey Valley are old. When the oak trees and other ancient trees are old enough, they can develop intelligence and evolve into ancient trees of life, ancient trees of wisdom, or ancient trees of war. They are the symbiotic partners of our people, and also our weapons. We cannot allow the tribe to enter our territory and cut wood. Wuxia suddenly felt bitter in his mouth. Chapter 1102. Woken bowed again. I'm sorry, but I would like to clarify something here. Duque spread his hands. Go ahead. Ever since the tribe crossed the Kalimdor continent and took root in the barren, ownerless land of Duroder, the tribe has been trying to avoid invading the territories of other intelligent races. When Woken said this, Tyrande could not help but clench her fists and gently bite her lips. How could the death of the demigod Cenarius be forgotten so easily? Of course, Woken noticed Tyrande's reaction, but because of his position, he could only continue. The tribe has not mastered the more advanced construction methods. Out of development needs, the tribe needs at least 100,000 tons of wood. This number almost made Tyrande jump on the spot. Pension. It was processed wood, not raw wood. Converted to raw wood, the number was even more exaggerated. Woken braced himself. According to preliminary estimates, this is only the first phase of our needs. Only the first phase. Tyrande almost wanted to declare war on behalf of the Night Elves. Woken continued to explain, the tribe has no intention of making things difficult for the Night Elves. We have no other choice. The nearby barren lands, Stonetalan Mountains, Mulgore, Thousand Needles, and Dustwallow have no suitable wood. Although Faralas in the southwest has good wood, we can't transport it out of the Thousand Needles, which is extremely bad terrain. If possible, the tribe is willing to exchange any of our existing resources. Tyrande gritted her teeth. The Night Elves will never trade their friends. The atmosphere suddenly fell to a freezing point. Woken had a headache over this matter. The tribe needed a huge amount of wood, but they could not use force. Coupled with the Night Elves joining the alliance, the tribe could only be cautious on this matter. Tyrande could not help but look at Duque, who was sitting in the seat of honor. Tyrande's mood was very complicated. She had absolute trust in Duque, but she did not only represent herself. However, she did not represent just herself. If Duke did things unfairly, then the voices within the clan against joining the alliance would quickly rise, and by then, there would be a big problem. Duque raised his hand and made a gesture of suppression. Lord Whisperwind, please don't get too worked up. Wuxia, could you please tell me the standard of the wood your tribe wants? Woken immediately replied, converted to logs, it's at least 30 yards high, hard enough to be used as the main beam of a house. Duque smiled. That's easy. Grey Valley was not the only place in the world that had this kind of wood. Just the Elwyn Forest and Twilight Forest within the territory of Stormwind Kingdom have plenty of such wood. Although there was a lot of good timber around Eagle Nest Mountain, A third of the areas mentioned above were directly under Duque's jurisdiction. He was the master of his territory. If he could make the decision himself, he would be even more daring. Perhaps this was what it meant to be pretentious. Really? This time, Wuxia was really happy. Do you have a sample? Of course. Duque snapped his fingers and Vanessa, who was wearing a maid's uniform, came up. Inform the Mason Brotherhood to bring a sleeper in. Understood. From the beginning of the reconstruction of Lordaeron City, Wuxia and Xianxia began to help Lordaeron build 2 railways. One was from the North Flow coast to Lordaeron City, which was convenient for reconstruction. The other was the east-west railway artery that traversed the woodlands of Tirisful and the eastern and western plaguelands, all the way to Tyr's Hand, connecting the entire old territory of Lordaeron. In the capital, there was no shortage of materials to build railways. Not long after, 8 big men came in carrying a train sleeper that had long been cut into square strips. Of course, it could not be ordinary goods that could be used as a sleeper. Moreover, the steam engines in this world were far worse than the steam engines in the industrial era before Duque crossed over. Because of the industrial level, iron and steel were still far from the standards that Duque wanted. As a result, the steam engines here were larger and heavier, and even the train tracks were twice as large as those on Earth. As a result, the requirements for the sleepers were also much higher. Wuxia's eyes lit up when he saw this. He touched the wood, knocking here and there, then looked up. Can the Alliance guarantee that the wood sold to the Horde is of this quality? And can the Alliance really transport so much wood across the sea? Don't joke. As early as 4 years ago, the Alliance could already transport 100,000 troops and equipment across the sea to the Kalandor continent. It's really not difficult to transport 100,000 tons of wood. Duque smiled. As for the quality, I can also guarantee it here. Of course, there will be losses when transporting such a large amount of wood across the sea, and the price will inevitably need to be adjusted. What does the Alliance want from the Horde? Wuxia asked. High-purity ores, mainly iron ore. Other rare ores are also needed, such as gold, mithril, true silver, thorium. When Duque said this, the eyes of the few dwarves next to him sparkled. Magni did not look like a king at all, and his mouth was actually drooling like a dog. Duque rolled his eyes at Magni. When Bulang saw this, he hurriedly pulled his big brother who had a blacksmith's soul to wake Magni up. Damn, don't affect the Alliance's image here, okay? If it weren't for the fact that you are the king of the Alliance and the Horde, I would definitely beat you up. Wuxia thought for a moment. After all, the Horde was in urgent need of wood, so he nodded and agreed. Then the specific proportion and method of the transaction. Now that the Alliance has recognized the Barren Lands as the Horde's territory, and Dustwallow Swamp is also under Theramor's control, then the transaction will be found near the border. As for the price and details of the transaction, we will let the people below discuss it. When 2 major forces negotiated, it was always the boss who set the tone, and the people below would grind out the details and the price. For the sake of insurance, Wuxia proposed to go to the Elven Forest to see the goods. Duque agreed and welcomed Wuxia to the Elven Forest as a guest. After sending Wuxia away, Duque said, Your Majesty Proudmoore, the transaction with the Horde will be handed over to you. Xianxia nodded. Is there anything I need to pay attention to? First of all, we must be fair, whether it is price, quantity, or quality. We agreed to give 10,000 tons of high-quality wood, not one less. For the Horde, the difference in the content of ores must not exceed 5%. Sal is a fair guy. As long as we are strict enough, they will do the same. Jaina's heart was a little cold. If the requirements were so high, then at least 10,000 tons at a time. In order to avoid loss, at least 13,000 tons would be safe. This way, the transportation costs would obviously skyrocket. Chapter 1103. Then, those who are interested in the ores can pay Cultiras to build an ironworks in Theramore. The ores can be melted into metal ingots and shipped back. When Duque said this, Magni's eyes lit up. First of all, this would greatly reduce the pressure on transportation. At the same time, it would open the door for the steel stove fort to join in. Secondly, developing mining in Theramore would give Theramore an industrial base. This made Theramore's position even more prominent. Jaina was very happy about this. After all, no matter how Kultiras rebuilt his land, he could only rely on shipping due to his geographical location. But Theramore was different. Duque's next words made the Alliance powerhouses understand what it meant to reveal the dagger. The broken roads in Dustwallow Swamp are not suitable for transportation. When the time comes, Proudmoore can bring one of the chiefs there and announce that a railway will be built from Theramore all the way to the border of the Barren Lands. Of course, if the Horde feels that it is too troublesome to rely on human and animal power in the future, the Alliance can also help the Horde build a railway through the entire Barren Lands, for free. Those who had not experienced the era of railway transportation would never understand how prosperous the transportation of goods, people, and culture would be after the railway was built. Although the teleportation portal could be reached in an instant, compared to the high mana consumption, only the railway was truly cheap and efficient. Ever since Duque started to promote the railway in the Alliance had completely changed in the past 20 years. This was especially so for Lordaeron. After Queen Kalia came to power, she forcefully pushed for the development of the railway. That was why Lordaeron was able to recover its vitality in just 4 years. If the Horde dared to bring the railway into the Barren Lands, it would be like putting the sword of Damocles on their necks. It would be fine if the Alliance and the Horde did not start a war. Once a war broke out, the core areas of the Horde would be destroyed. Even if peace was maintained, a railway to the border of the Barren Lands was a hidden and fatal noose that could be tightened at any time. After all, it was 100 times easier to build a railway on solid and barren land than to build a railway in a swamp filled with mud and mud. Once the most difficult part was settled, the rest would be easy. Facing Duque's piercing gaze, Tyrande immediately realized that this was the Alliance's sneaky counterattack against the tribe's suppression of the Night Elves. Duque's passionate gaze caused Tyrande's entire body to heat up, and she did not dare to meet his gaze. "All right, next up, Your Majesty Windrun." Servanas, who was called out by Duque, was a little stunned. He nodded. "Is there anything I can do for you?" Duque's lips curled into a smile. He thought back to when he had accepted a quest in the game to save Magni's precious daughter, Princess Moira Bronzebeard. When he arrived at the scene, he found that he and his teammates had to endure the attacks of this silly princess who had Stockholm Syndrome and had fallen in love with her father's enemy, the Iron King Dragon Tharissen, to deal with the Iron King. All right. After the Black Iron King was taken care of, even more shocking information was revealed. Moira announced that she was pregnant with Dragon's child, and that she was in love with Dragon. Not only did she refuse to return to Iron Furnace Castle, she was also prepared to give birth to this child. The players were in a state of confusion. But, in order to unite the Three Hammers once again and form the Three Hammers Council, Duque very unkindly wished Magni well in his heart. Prepare to be a lord. Of course, Duque now looked completely unconcerned. After Magni had finished and calmed down, he said, "Things are far more troublesome than we thought. The latest information I received shows that the remnants of the Blackrock Orcs, the Black Iron Dwarves, and the Elemental Lord faction that escaped from the Battle of the Scorching Gorge all seem to be on the move." Chapter 1104. As usual, Duque was prepared to present the intelligence and convince the kings with evidence. However, this time, Duque was dumbfounded. Magni waved his short and muscular hand. "Intelligence says, please, I've known you for 20 years, Duque. Anything you emphasize is definitely not a good thing. This stupid world was almost destroyed for the 3rd time. Even if you tell me that the 4th apocalypse is coming, I won't be surprised at all. Just tell me, who is the boss of the enemy this time? How far do we have to go? Tell us and we'll do it." The dwarves liked to ignore the process and go straight to the result. The dwarves were known for being rough and direct. He didn't expect the other kings and bosses to all nod in agreement. The great craftsman Gerben wiped his small round glasses with a cloth and absent-mindedly agreed. "Yes. Duque, just say it. Is it a local war or an all-out war? Tell us, let us have an idea, and it'll be easier to prepare firearms. Just give us a copy of your intelligence and speech, and we'll use it to fool the people below us. My Storm Warhammer is thirsting for it. Kudrin was also heckling. All of a sudden, the dwarves who needed to be convinced all raised their hands and feet and voted in favor. Duque's mouth turned into an O shape. He suddenly realized that the speech he prepared was useless. Looking around, his own queen didn't need to be convinced. They had already started to mobilize. The Dalajan's boss was Ronan, and he would definitely follow Duque's lead. Duque himself was the representative of Stormwind this time. All right, it's a unanimous vote. Duque didn't argue anymore. He directly walked to the military map, pressed his hands on the edge of the map table, and leaned forward. It was a posture like a tiger's roar. There are two factions of enemies. One is the remnants of the Black Dragons, Prince Nefarian and Princess Onyxia. Right now, Nefarian is controlling the Blackrock Orcs and a large number of Draconians occupying the upper and lower levels of the Blackrock Tower. The other faction is... Duque raised his right hand with his palm facing the sky. Suddenly, an illusion of a fire giant with an inverted triangular upper body and a flaming hammer appeared. During the era of the Dark Empire, which was even older than the Ancient Era, there was a fire elemental lord, Ragnaros, who occupied the southeastern part of the ancient Kalandor continent. He single-handedly turned the ancient Redridge Mountains into the burning steppes of today. Damn it! It was this guy. Was it finally going to wake up? Alright, if that's the case, we, the Bronzebeard dwarves, will take responsibility. Magni stood up abruptly. Kudrin had the same reaction. Count the Wildhammer dwarves in. At the end of the day, it was all because of the War of the Three Hammers that Ragnaros, who followed the ancient gods, appeared in this world. Emperor Thorison had lost, but he wanted to rely on summoning to make a comeback, which resulted in him summoning the Flame Demon King. Not only did he die, even his Dark Iron dwarves had become slaves. Duque said loudly, in fact, Ragnaros showed signs of recovery in the final battle of the Second Dark Portal. At that time, the fire elemental giant Baron Geddon appeared. I think everyone still has an impression of him. The big shots of the Alliance who had experienced the Second Dark Portal nodded. So, our worst-case scenario is that the Black Dragons and the Fire Elementals attack us at the same time. Queen Sylvanas said, can't we let the Dragonsleep Temple deal with the Black Dragons? It would have been better if Queen Sylvanas hadn't mentioned it, but after she did, Duque was also angry. As one of the witnesses of history, he finally knew why the Black Dragons were so arrogant that no dragon came to deal with them. In fact, after I returned from the River of Time, I went to find Nozdormu and also to the Dragonsleep Temple. Everyone, do you know why there was no news of the Burning Legion on planet Azeroth after the death of Archimonde, one of their two commanders? It can't be that they were afraid, right? Kalia said. Duque sighed. Of course not. The Burning Legion relied on the fact that as long as the demons didn't die in the Twisting Nether, they could resurrect indefinitely. Now, there are over 10,000 demons coming to the atmosphere of planet Azeroth every day to cause trouble. Anyway, the 4 major dragon races are very busy now. Atmosphere? Are you referring to above the clouds? Kudrin asked. You can say that. The atmosphere also includes low-level clouds, but the place where the dragons and demons fight is higher, where there is no air. Can we only rely on the power of us mortals? Ronan touched his beard. Duque corrected. If it was the Blackrock Orcs and the Iron Dwarves, then the mortal army can still deal with them. But the most important thing now is to organize an elite team of extraordinaires to go deep into the Blackrock Mountain called the Molten Core and deal with the Fire Elemental King inside. If possible, we can deal with Nefarian at the top of the Blackrock Tower. You seem to have missed a target? Jaina frowned. Duque smiled. I didn't miss it. The next plan is the key. At the beginning of January, the Alliance Conference came up with a series of new policies. It involved various aspects. Diplomatically, the Night Elves joined the Alliance and reached an agreement with the Horde. Militarily, the Alliance announced that in May and October, to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the alliance, there would be a military parade in Stormwind City, which was the center of the first war against the Dark Portal, and Lordaeron, which established the alliance. In terms of internal affairs, apart from a package of policies aimed at strengthening trade and cultural exchanges within the alliance, the most attractive thing was that from February onwards, a grand festival would be held almost every other month to celebrate the 20th anniversary. February 14th, Valentine's Day. May 7th, Children's Week. June 21st, Midsummer Day. September 20th, Brewfest. When the news spread, the entire Eastern Kingdom was in an uproar as the people spread the news. It was no wonder that the people reacted so enthusiastically. After all, the Eastern Kingdom had been in turmoil for the past 20 years. The 3 wars against the Dark Portal basically plowed the entire Eastern Kingdom back and forth. Many people fled from Stormwind to Lordaeron, and from Lordaeron back to Stormwind, crossing 2 continents in a single round trip. Especially Arthas' inhumane undead legion, it sent chills down the spine of the people. Although the Scourge army had been completely wiped out from Lordaeron, the occasional massacre of villages by the followers of the Church of the Damned still served as a disguised reminder to the people of the terrifying existence. Until now, many people were still worried about the return of the Lich King. It could be said that as long as Arthas and Nuzul were not destroyed by the Holy Light, the people who had experienced the Scourge of the Undead would not be able to sleep well. Now that the Alliance announced a series of festivals, it could more or less dilute the fear and sorrow in the hearts of the people. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.